Nice job. All right. Welcome, everyone, virtual and in person. We're going to get started, and it's lovely to see so many faces in person in your three dimensions. We will kick it off with our call to order and our hybrid COVID opening, in keeping with the Oregon Public Meetings Law, statutory land use hearing requirements, and Title 33 of the Portland City Code. I'm going to take this off while The Portland Planning and Sustainability Commission is holding this meeting virtually. All members of the PSC are attending remotely, and the city has made several avenues available for the public to watch the broadcasting of this meeting. I did the wrong thing. We're doing it in hybrid, which provides for both virtual and in-person attendance for commissioners, staff, and the public. Members of the PSC will elect to attend in person or remotely by video and teleconference. The public may watch the live stream or attend in person in the Commission Room at 1900 Southwest 4th Avenue, Suite 2500. Public testimony for projects that have a hearing at the PSC will be taken both in person and by electronic means. The PSC is taking these steps as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the continued need to limit in-person contact and promote physical distancing when warranted. The pandemic is an emergency that threatens the public health, safety, and welfare of the public. Thank you all for your patience, humor, flexibility, and understanding as we navigate this situation to do the city's business. And with that, I'd love to open it up to items of interest from commissioners, beginning with, if I may, a report out of our work group meetings on the two separate work groups that we have been working on. Erica, please. Thank you.
Yes, sounds good. So we have two work groups. The first one is the roles and responsibilities of the Future Planning Commission, and the second one is culture and engagement. The first group has been attended by Jesse, Steph, Eli, and me. And the second group, I believe, so far has been Steph and Valeria. Is that right? I did not attend the first session for group 2, so Steph, feel free to jump in if you have anything to add. We've had, as group 1, one initial meeting, and then we've had a hybrid meeting together, which was really great. So far, the discussion for group 1 has focused on membership, lengths of term, and then in conjunction with group 2, we've gotten into commission purpose and powers and duties. And for each of the topics with staff, we have reviewed some common practices from other cities, which has been really helpful to understand what alternatives exist out there to the ways that we've been working. As far as membership goes, some of the discussion themes so far include representation. What is the best number of commissioners to include a range of perspectives and experiences, and also to represent the diversity of our city? How do we define expertise, recognizing that knowledge and insight can come from sources that are outside of formal professions? We've also talked about lengths of terms, balancing the somewhat steep learning curve that's associated with this body with the need for fresh perspectives. And then we've also talked about codification of, or some definition, at least perhaps in the bylaws, of the youth commissioner role. And then diving into the commission purpose, powers, and duties has been a little bit headier. We've talked about whether our purpose as a commission needs to go beyond or provide specificity to the values and priorities and goals that are already outlined in the comp plan. And we've talked about what it means to steward and develop and maintain the comp plan and whether those are the right words to be using. We've also talked about our currently codified duties that include things like street vacations, signs, and tree code, and whether the Planning Commission should continue to have purview or a role in each of those. And so I think that kind of sums it up. It's pretty difficult to distill what was a fairly expansive conversation into a pretty brief update. And I definitely don't envy the job that staff has now of distilling all of that and synthesizing it into a proposed draft, which is what they'll be working on next. So, Steph, anything to add related to Group 2?
Thank you. No, that was great. And thank you so much, Erica. Other items of interest for commissioners? Okay. Seeing none, I'd love to go to the director's report. Patricia.
Good evening. Is this working? Yeah? All right, very good. Good evening, everyone, commissioners, members of the audience, participants. Patricia Diefendorfer, Chief Planner, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Don't have a lot to report this afternoon, just wanted to share that you all may be aware that there is a community involvement committee that is also a committee that is hosted and sponsored by the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. That committee, there's recruitment going on for that committee right now. You may have seen the notice for that. And the recruitment is happening right now, and there will be new committee members appointed. And I believe their first meeting of this year will be on October 11th. So just wanted to share that because there's some overlap between this commission and that committee. That committee is a committee that advises staff on outreach, public outreach and engagement. And that's something that we will be talking about more in our work groups too, is the different engagement functions and, where they occur, what kind of engagement occurs in the Planning Commission forum, et cetera. So that's just an FYI for all of you. And that's all I have to report right now. Thank you.
Thank you. The next consent agenda, in addition to the meeting minutes from September 13th, we also have proposed street vacation on Northeast 24th Avenue and of North Kirby Avenue. So consideration of the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
All right. Okay, and Jesse seconds. And could I see by virtual or real hands an up? Okay, one. Yeah, Jeff.
I did not attend, and I've not yet gone back and watched, so I'll be abstaining from the minutes.
Okay, great. One abstention, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It passes. Thank you very much. And with that, we'd love to get onto the Cully TIF briefing, and I'd love to invite up.
Chair Ralph, I'm sorry. Did we also act on the consent item, the street vacations?
Yes,
Oh,
that was
okay.
part of the. I mentioned
Perfect,
those as part of the
'cause,
consent agenda, and that was.
I just heard the minutes, so I wanted to make sure
Oh,
procedurally
so
that we
sorry.
moved. Yeah. Can we maybe
thank you.
take that motion again?
Great.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and move adoption of the 2 street vacations on the consent agenda.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Can we have a second?
I will second.
Okay, great. Thank you. And now, thank you, Patricia. Can we virtual or real hands? Great. Okay. Thank you. And now to the Cully TIF. Could I and forgive me? I would love Lisa Abwaf, Matthew Shaybald, and forgive me if I'm crushing names. Vivian Satterfield and Maria Grzanka.
Chair Roth,
Yeah.
good afternoon. Just want to let you know that the presentation will start with Nicholas Stearns
Okay.
of the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability staff, and then we will hand the mic over to the others. So thank you.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Nicholas Starn with Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. We're here today with Prosper Portland and Portland Housing Bureau staff to review with the Commission the proposed new Cully Tax Increment Finance District. formerly known and sometimes referred to in other certain contexts as an urban renewal area. So if you hear those two terms today, they mean the same thing. We're kind of transitioning to TIF districts. The plan was developed through a community-driven process that you will hear more about when Housing Bureau and Prosper staff come up. Would create a 1,600-acre new urban renewal area, or TIF district, in Northeast Portland that would generate approximately $320 million over a 30-year life of the plan for housing and economic development projects. Yes. I thought I was sharing. It says I'm sharing the screen. It says you are screen sharing. Working now? Okay. Thanks. So just briefly go over the planned order of events. I'll do just a very brief presentation here, focusing on the role of the Planning Commission in TIF district creation and the intersection with the comprehensive plan. And then the bulk of the presentation will be by Prosper Portland and the Housing Bureau and some invited speakers. Then there'll be, I believe there's at least one person, maybe two people that have signed up to testify, one. And then there'll be time for discussion. And just we are asking today for a recommendation from the commission. So just briefly, I'll just start by explaining why we're here today with a TIF plan. Urban renewal is authorized in the state under Oregon Revised Statute 457. Proposed urban renewal plans, or TIF district plans, are prepared by urban renewal agencies, and in the city of Portland, Prosper Portland is our designated urban renewal agency, who bring the proposed plans before the Prosper Portland board, who makes a recommendation to City Council, and City Council adopts the plan. The statute also includes a requirement that the urban renewal plans, or TIF district plans, come before the Planning Commissions and offer you an opportunity to make recommendations also to the City Council. And similar to land use decisions, which are governed by a different statute, there is a requirement that TIF district plans comply with the city's comprehensive plan. And these requirements are for PSC review and for compliance with the plan are reinforced by policies in our comprehensive plan. In summary, staff has reviewed the plan and the TIF district plan and report, and we believe that it complies with the comprehensive plan as a whole. And in particular, it supports the guiding principles in the plan for equity and economic prosperity, the goals and policies of Chapter 2 regarding community involvement, goals and policies in the housing chapter, and the economic development policies in Chapter 6. The Cully plan supports the comp plan community of involvement policies through its community-driven plan development process that it went through, its emphasis on serving underserved and marginalized and underrepresented communities, what are referred to in the plan as priority communities, which I think you'll hear more about later in the presentation, and the co-creation plan development and implementation model that this new plan, TIF plan, represents, which hopefully will be useful and inform future TIF district creation in the city. The Cully TIF plan also supports comp plan housing policies through its emphasis on neighborhood stabilization and anti-displacement, with future funding targeted toward support for home repair, home ownership, rehab, and preservation of existing housing, new multifamily housing development, and houseless facilities. The plan also supports economic development policies in the comp plan, including goals and policies for retaining and expanding economic opportunities in Cully through investments in building renovations, retention of and expansion of existing businesses, and support for startup businesses. And finally, just perhaps most specifically, the Cully Plan directly implements Comprehensive Plan Policy 6.32 with its very intentional emphasis in the Cully Plan on outcomes that primarily benefit existing residents and benefits as growth and change inevitably occur in Cully, an area that is already experiencing gentrification and market pressures. So I'll just close up my bit, and then I'm happy to answer questions now or later with our specific requests to the Commission today. Ask you to consider writing a letter to City Council that finds that the Cully TIF District Plan conforms to the City of Portland Comprehensive Plan and recommend that the City Council adopt the plan. The plan represents a really different co-creation model for the development and implementation of urban renewal areas and is in sync with direction from the comprehensive plan to focus on development outcomes for those most vulnerable to displacement and gentrification. So with that, I will turn it over to Lisa and crew, unless you have any questions for me at this time.
A couple of people have noted the request for disclosures, which I'll do right before the hearing, just so you know.
Okay. Good evening, all, and thank you for the opportunity to present about this work. I'm Lisa Abwaf. I'm the Director of Development and Investment with Prosper Portland. And I just want to take a moment to reflect on, after 4 years of the making, we're really proud and excited to be before you here today. We undertook a new process, and it did take us a while to get here, but we're super excited. And I also want to reflect on the fact that I'm actually joined today by two community partners who are also on the Exploration Leadership Committee with Vivian Satterfield and Maria Grzenka, as well as Matthew Schabold with the Portland Housing Bureau. And so we'll be doing kind of a tag-teamed effect of a presentation before you today. And I also want to take a moment and just acknowledge that part of the time was really spent working on what you will hear us talk a lot about this evening around co-creation between city and community partners. This is a new way, definitely, I think, for Prosper Portland to do our work, but also for the city as we think about doing our work differently in the future. And I think it's a commitment that you'll see is ongoing as we talk about the governance charter as well as the TIF plan. So our agenda today will kick off with a little bit of kind of background, both in terms of process and a little context on why Cully, in terms of looking at a new TIF districts. Then Vivian and Maria will describe a bit more about the exploration process that the community led for the past number of years. Matthew will provide detail on the plan itself, what's in it, what are the eligible projects that we're taking a look at. And then I'll wrap it up with a high-level look at what we are calling a governance charter and the concept of an action plan. And then we have some invited testimony that I think includes a video, so bear with us. We'll try to make sure that we're hitting all of our technology on target. So a little bit of background in terms of the trends and economic context that we're seeing in Cully. As you can see on this slide, the area has lost nearly half of its Black population in recent years. And in fact, when compared to the rest of Portland, its average income is 24% lower than the average in Portland. And that's compounded by the fact that households in Cully also tend to be larger. So you have more people who are relying on a lower income. At the same time, what you see on the right-hand side of this slide is that we are seeing market trends really put pressure on both businesses and residents who are living in the area. And some of those indicators are a forecast that predicts a 33% increase in multifamily lease rates, a 22% increase on industrial lease rates impacting businesses, and a 15% increase on retail lease rates. And in combination, this shows that Cully residents and business owners both alike are at risk of displacement and continued residential and commercial impacts. So the next slide, we also wanted to kind of tag team back to some of the work that the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability has been doing around anti-displacement and vulnerability. What you see in these maps here is that the data set that I showed in kind of the near term is further supported by recent mapping that was done by the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability that shows both on the left is a map showing vulnerability. That's based on a number of factors that include race, education, income, housing tenures, etc. And it shows that households in Cully range from medium to high vulnerability relative to the rest of the city. And on the right is the displacement risk map, this typology which was pioneered together with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability by Dr. Lisa Bates, adds market factors to vulnerability factors and shows that Cully is in fact already in kind of dynamic late or what is called type 2 phases of gentrification. And that means that yes, in fact, market pressures are currently happening and vulnerable populations are being displaced. And with that kind of context setting of why Cully, why now, kind of what was happening within community, I'm going to hand it over to Vivian and Maria for their portion of the presentation.
Thanks, Lisa. Can everyone hear me okay? Excellent, thank you. And Lisa, I'm going to let you know when I need the next slide advanced. Thank you. Commissioners, members of the public who are tuning in, I'm Vivian Satterfield, use she, her pronouns. I work for Verde, member organization of the Living Cully Partnership, as the Director of Strategic Partnerships. It's really wonderful to be culminating here today in so many years of work to be able to offer this presentation to you. The TIF exploration work really builds on the capacity built through something that should be familiar to you all, the Neighborhood Prosperity Network Program at Prosper Portland, which is the signature community economic development program for the city. Thank you. With the overarching focus being human-centered, inclusive economic development approach. There are 7 NPNs in the city, with 2 of them being located in the Cully neighborhood. Priorities of the network they're all led by strong community economic development organizations, such as some of the logos that you see here. Priorities of the network, business stabilization through the business development and business district improvements, community stabilization of community members through direct employment, district visibility through events and promotions, and community and business stabilization through community-led property development. This is a challenge with the minimal access to capital to get funds into property development. That's something that a lot of Cully neighbors have direct experience of as well. The community organizational capacity that was built over the last 10 years in collaboration with a strong partnership with Prosper Portland staff strengthened the trust and created the launchpad for the community organizations within Cully to begin discussing and trusting the possibilities of exploring how a larger TIF district could help stabilize the most vulnerable to displacement in our communities. Next slide, please. So in Cully, the NPNs joined with other community partners whose logos you see here to form a coalition to explore the use of the TIF funds and in the creation of a proposed TIF district. It's really important to highlight that this initiative and the TIF district proposal was brought by the community and community partners to Prosper Portland, not the other way around. I'll also point that I submitted on behalf of Verde a testimony which really outlines from our organization the perspective and investment that we have in the Cully TIF creation process. And so I hope you will read that for your consideration as well as you deliberate. Next slide, please. There's lots of reasons to focus on Cully. The neighborhood has seen rapid change and market pressures are pushing a lot of our neighbors and neighborhood businesses out. We also need more resources to help people stay in place and benefit from this growth rather than being pushed out of it. Because of this, back in 2018, the community approached the city to request an exploration process of how TIF resources might be a tool to help stabilize vulnerable community members. Cully's a really special place. We have a strong history of community development and relationships within the district, from relationships between community-based organizations such as Verde to capacity within the CDC and Neighborhood Prosperity Initiative partners. And the community-developed preliminary report identified some challenges in the community. There are things that we're all pretty familiar with, from sparse commercial development to poor or unsafe walkability and dangerous streets or undeveloped sidewalks to potentially redevelopable brownfields. The process that we've undertaken over the past 4 years has been a close partnership between the Exploration Leadership Committee, Prosper Portland staff, Portland Housing Bureau, and represents a significant lift by many of the partner organizations listed on the previous slides. It took a long time for us to get to a place in which we really felt all comfortable using the language of co-creation, so I don't take that lightly at all. It all began with a letter from Cully Partners back in October of 2018, and also some initial seed funding from some governmental partners. We received a $170,000 grant from Metro Regional Government, $50,000 from the city's general fund, and $100,000 plus staffing support from Prosper Portland to help launch this exploration process. And with that, we were able to co-create a strong, inclusive, community-led process to explore the use of TIF funds for stabilizing households and businesses in Cully. So the proposal before you today represents the outcome of that work and many, many, many hours, both formally logged and outside of that, in conversation to really understand how this process could be used to the benefit of community and not weaponized as it has been historically in the past. So today we're now in a more formal process, providing briefings and seeking formal consideration of the TIF plan, the report, and related governance charter that was co-created with the ELC. And note, the work to date has been led by the Exploration Leadership Committee, the ELC, but after adoption, a new body and the Community Leadership Committee will be appointed to partner in this ongoing work. Others will describe this in more detail later in the presentation, including a lot more about community engagement, which is honestly the fun part, which I'll pass it now to Maria to be able to share more. Thank you. This is a very tall chair. Get some extra. Oh, yeah. Okay, how's that? Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Maria Gerzanka. I live in the Cully neighborhood. I operate a home-based business there, and I'm recently elected the chair of the Cully Association of Neighbors. So I'm going to share a little bit more about the community engagement process that was involved in the co-creation of the TIF plan, report, and governance charter. The Community Engagement Committee of the Exploration Leadership Committee led community-specific focus groups and other types of engagement to really get a sense from the equity side on where these what the needs were in these different priority communities. In total, there were 48 focus groups over 2 years, including 500 participants. And the engagement with those groups was critical to drafting the preliminary report and formed a foundation of what became the TIF plan and the TIF report. It's also been the way and kind of a network where the ELC has checked back on key issues as they came up during the creation and finalization of the TIF plan and report, specifically on areas like the priority communities language that was mentioned earlier. Also in response to broader community and council inquiries and feedback, Prosper and Portland Housing Bureau led broader place-based engagement with the other organizations you see listed here in green, like the other neighborhood associations, large employers, as well as holding 2 public open houses to share updates and gather broad input. Next slide. And these are some of the priorities that we heard from those groups, from both of the types of groups mentioned on the earlier slide. So these became prioritized in and used as guiding principles, like stabilizing community, with the community providing oversight and deep engagement to the proposed projects, providing recreation spaces for youth and communities, people in the community, and also working to remove opportunity access barriers. Okay, next slide.
So the vision that was used to model this TIF proposal is, I'm just going to read it. The community's long-term vision is to transform Cully into a place that provides a sense of belonging for its residents, particularly for priority communities. This means Cully will have plentiful, safe, affordable housing, thriving Black, Indigenous, and people of color-owned businesses, rewarding employment opportunities, safe and accessible transportation options, parks and open spaces, a clean and healthy environment, climate resiliency, with places and programs that reflect the cultural diversity of BIPOC individuals.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Great. For the record, my name is Matthew Schaubold with the Portland Housing Bureau. So given the question before the commission this evening is around the conformance with the comprehensive plan, we did want to highlight some of the goals and policies within the comprehensive plan that we think were met through both the process that we've gone through as well as the plan and the report and the governance structure. So this is not the full list, but it's some that we really wanted to highlight. So as we've talked about, this was very much a community-led process. The community initiated conversations around having a TIF district to fund programs and services in their neighborhood. And many of the community involvement goals and policies in the comprehensive plan are focused around centering community, being responsive to community, building the capacity of community. In addition, there are goals and policies around representation, racial equity, social justice, accessibility and participation, community wisdom and partnership. And so I think you've heard some of that through the kind of the overview of the process. Hopefully you see it also in the product, the plan, the report, and the governance structure. So we definitely feel like we have met a lot of the intentions and the goals and policies that have been set forth by the commission in the past, and we're very proud of the work product we have in front of you today. Next slide. So I'm going to give an overview of the TIF district plan as it stands today, the proposed plan. We've been going through the process of meeting with the Prosper Portland Board. We've met with the Portland Housing Advisory Commission. We've met with the partner jurisdictions to brief them on the proposal, the school district, as well as the Multnomah County chair, the chair of the Board of County Commissioners. And we are now here before you today. And we'll be giving a report to City Council tomorrow afternoon, and then taking the final question to City Council this November. Next slide. So the proposed Cully TIF boundary, again, as with everything, was a product of the co-creation process. And so what you have here is the proposed boundary in the plan itself. The district would range roughly from 42nd Avenue to 82nd Avenue. Much of the district is single-family residential. It's over 1,600 acres, but there's still plenty of space that is employment industrial, as well as commercial corridors to help promote the priorities that the community identified through the process. Next slide. The priority communities for the plan, I'm going to read this language specifically so that it's in the record. A little bit of context for how we arrived at this. This has been a long process, a multi-year process. It's been a new process for how the city engages in this work, and I think it's been very positive, the co-creation process. But part of this was an understanding that once, if a TIF district is established, and funding starts to accrue, and programs start to get implemented, and those programs have policies, that what programs are chosen, what policies are implemented, will really drive, who is going to be able to access resources, who's going to be supported, and who's going to be benefited. So there was a lot of conversation and good dialogue around what language can we use to make sure that not just ourselves, as we're collectively considering the establishment of this district and this plan, but also the people who will be in our seats in the future, so that everyone can fully understand where the focus of the plan was and can continue to move the work forward. So I'm going to just read it into the record. Priority communities refers to the intended beneficiaries of the Cully TIF district. African American and Black persons, Indigenous and Native American persons, persons of color, immigrants and refugees of any legal status, renters, mobile home residents, persons with disabilities, low-income people, houseless people, and other population groups that are systemically vulnerable to exclusion from Cully due to gentrification and displacement. Next slide, please. Here you see 7 goals for the overall TIF district. Generally speaking, I think the goals and the project list that you'll see in a minute create a framework for the use of Cully TIF district funds. That framework is very much focused on how is it that the city and the community can use these resources to help and stabilize existing households, existing businesses, to prevent the displacement from the community, and then to go beyond preventing the displacement of households and businesses from the community, as well as community institutions, but to actually help them thrive moving into the future as the city changes. Next slide. Similarly, the eligible projects list, which is the list of, when you look at a TIF district plan, for those that are not familiar, there are a list of projects that are identified, and under the governing statutes for TIF districts in Oregon, if a project category is not identified in the TIF plan, then it is not eligible for funding moving into the future. And so the eligible projects list is quite extensive, but again, generally the focus is around affordable housing and affordable home ownership and home repair and home stabilization programs. It's around business support and property acquisition and development and renovation to support affordable business space and stabilizing and growing existing businesses in the community. Again, around the framework of the goals that are being set for the overall district. There's also eligibility for projects around art and culture and signage and land acquisition and land banking and recreational improvements and infrastructure. But again, the nexus around some of these, like infrastructure improvements, is really to be focused on, is it related to projects and programs that are designed and implemented to support housing affordability, business stabilization, cultural institution stabilization around the framework of preventing displacement, involuntary displacement, and gentrification. Next slide. And then again, similar to the community involvement, we wanted just to highlight some of the goal and policy areas where we thought we definitely are in alignment with the comprehensive plan goals and policies. So, you see here all of the Chapter 5 housing goals, and we really think, because such a large focus of this is on funding affordable housing programs, affordable rental units, affordable home ownership, home repair and stabilization for existing homeowners, that we really hit all of the Chapter 5 housing goals, and then the policies that waterfall under there. On Chapter 6 economic development, the programs and policies that we're looking to implement really help to support things around the goals around economic prosperity and business district vitality, and the policies around diverse and expanding economy and disparity reduction. And then, of course, as has been mentioned, the use of TIF plans or urban renewal plans to benefit existing residents and businesses. Next slide.
Okay, I'm going to bet it's on. Yeah, it's on. Okay. So we're going to close out kind of the formal presentation. We thought we would also hit on a couple of more procedural or governance elements that are really going to inform how we carry forward kind of the intents of the last 4 years together with what's reflected in the plan. And this really builds on a lot of what Matthew discussed about priority communities. Is definitely kind of a new integration into TIF plans. The other 2 elements that I would call out in around governance and kind of procedurally how we're going to march forward. One is this idea of action plans. In kind of recent years, Prosper has been leaning into the use of action plans to really break down what is otherwise a 30-year TIF plan into an ongoing dialogue with community around 5-year priorities. In this particular instance, it is we've committed to those action plans would be co-created with the leadership committee that Vivian referenced. Again, the 5-year priorities would really kind of, if you think about the TIF plan as the umbrella of what are we legally allowed to fund with TIF, the action plans would identify what are the 5-year priorities, what are the particular projects that the community sees as in the pipeline and opportunities that we should really be capturing. And then it also identifies budget that then shows up in terms of how the Housing Bureau and Prosper Portland, thank you, would allocate budget. The other thing that I would reflect on is it would be an integrated economic development and affordable housing action plan. The second big concept is captured in what is called the governance charter. So this is a new kind of addendum or attachment to the TIF plan. The governance charter commits to community leadership committee. You see here, we continue to center kind of the membership around the concept and the language of priority communities. We also spent a lot of time in terms of thinking about clarity of roles and responsibilities between the leadership committee and decision makers like the Prosper Portland Board or City Council, who ultimately continue to hold kind of stewardship and liability and responsibility for public stewardship of funds. And that we also know that this will take ongoing support that is both within community as well as staffing within Prosper Portland and PHB. And I would highlight here in terms of alignment with the comprehensive plan, I think this harkens back to many of the engagement values that were expressed earlier in the presentation. And then just to give you a sense of kind of how we're thinking about it, as Vivian reflected on, we spent a lot of time in this area as we both thought about what does co-creation mean with the TIF plan, but also as we go forward in partnership. So the committee really is the voice of community, making sure that the needs and priorities of community are heard and that there is a table for those to be discussed. Both current and ongoing. So again, if you imagine this as a 30-year commitment, it is both for kind of folks who are there today as well as ongoing, and they would make joint recommendations together with staff. Staff really is kind of the program administrator, a technical support to the committee. We would work in partnership to take forward joint recommendations up to decision makers at council and the Prosper Portland Board, depending on the decision at hand. And with that, I'm gonna share a little bit of like a snapshot. I think Nicholas shared this earlier, but just to give you a sense of where we are at that step 3. We're really in the middle of what's called a consult and confer period. So we are having ongoing meetings with the various peer and partner taxing jurisdictions. We will be at council tomorrow, actually, together with community, really kind of looking back and just reflecting on what the past 4 years of process has been and the current context of what's happening in Cully, as well as some of the long-range planning that has been done by the city previously for Cully, with the anticipation of actually coming back to council for action in November. And with that, this is going to test my technology skills. I might. Oh no. We might need. It is a pre-recorded video.
Volume, I think.
Button. Is there?
Jeez. I don't know if I can do this, but we'll see. Well, let's. Okay. What's that? I think I need to see the desktop.
Did you share the audio? Share the screen.
I know. I don't think Nicholas.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
I think you do.
Stop share and reshare again with the audio.
Mm-hmm.
I can help with this one.
I think you have to stop share.
There you
Oh,
go.
look at you.
Ms. Tracy Wells Bryant. And thank you for this opportunity to be able to share with the City Council. My name is Tracy Wells Bryant, and I've worked for over 20 years in the Cully neighborhood with Portland Community College Opportunity Centers. I serve as a training and education specialist, including serving in both career and business services. For the most part, I connect underserved and marginalized community residents and students to career education and employment opportunities. I worked for about 1.5 years with our 42nd Avenue Steering Committee, and more recently as part of the Shared Oversight Committee with our 42nd Avenue and Cully Boulevard Alliance. During this time, I've learned a lot, and I've had the privilege of working with a team of very invested individuals where we have leaned in with great intentionality and commitment to hearing the heart of the community. We've had complex conversations on a real grassroots level and have strived hard to capture and collect the community voices and experiences of those that live, work, and play in Cully. As a result, we've been able to rethink and reshape how we can do things differently in light of creating greater access, equity, inclusion, related, of course, to business and economic development. However, what I feel most passionate about sharing with you is acknowledging the past harms. It's no secret of the negative impacts that urban renewal plans have imposed upon Black folks in Portland, Oregon. From neighborhoods being completely divided by new developments, poor transit decisions, just multiple decisions and projects that have left so many Black residents and families broken, communities broken, to displacement, disconnection from all that has been familiar to them, from everything that's been accessible to them and everything that has been considered home, and so much more. This past and the residual impacts are still there, and including there's a lot of current anxiety that still exists for many as they even hear about new plans like this. Our change work, however, I feel is addressing these challenges. The intention of this TIF district is to use the same tools that have harmed to instead help repair and restore and develop, more importantly, a sustaining, healthy, inclusive, and thriving community. I believe this TIF district is also different in that we have taken not only a community-driven approach, but a bottom-up approach, meaning that in the past, decision makers have made decisions about what they think are best for neighborhoods. And I agree that we're all learning more about the overarching needs in our community. But as quoted from a very dear colleague of mine, learning is universal, but opportunity and access is not. So as I conclude, I would just like to say I believe this TIF district will create access and opportunity for Cully residents. More importantly, it gives Cully residents an opportunity to help shape the changes that need to be made in a real sustainable way in their own communities. So thank you so much for your time and consideration. Hello, and thank you for this opportunity to be able to share with the City Council.
There we go. That was what I needed. Go into the next slide. And with that, I think we also have other invited testimony that we'd like to come up. David, you want to join us?
And prior to that, before we start with testimony, if I may, just no. Just very briefly, we just want to get disclosures on the record from the PSC. So does anyone have disclosures? I believe Oriana might.
Yes, I do. I'd just like to disclose that while I did not work on the Cully TIF project, I am a colleague of Vivian's at Verde.
Great, thank you. Eli?
I also was not involved in the Cully TIF project, but many of my neighbors were because I live in the Cully neighborhood, but I feel I can participate. Thank you.
Thank you for that pause. Appreciate you.
With that, I'm going to invite David Sweet to testify, and then I think there's a closing slide. I think Nicholas told me there's a final closing slide, so I'll stay up here.
Good. Is the light on? Can you hear? Is it working? Okay, it is. Yeah, good evening, commissioners, folks watching from home, and all the people who have worked on this effort with us. Thank you. My name is David Sweet, and I have represented the Cully Association of Neighbors on the Exploration Leadership Committee for 4 years. The Cully neighborhood is a wonderful place to live, and I am privileged to live there. We enjoy and value our ethnic and economic diversity, and we are blessed with a wealth of place-based community organizations who work to retain that diversity. Their achievements have been impressive. A few examples. NEA has opened 2 new affordable housing developments with over 100 apartments and will soon open a third. Hacienda CDC will soon open Las Adelitas with 142 apartments on the site of the former Sugar Shack strip club. Habitat for Humanity Portland Metro has completed 3 affordable homeownership communities in Cully and is currently planning another. The Living Cully Coalition engineered the purchase of 2 of our 6 mobile home parks by a nonprofit and championed the creation of manufactured home zoning designation to limit redevelopment options for all the mobile home parks in the city. Our 2 neighborhood prosperity districts, our 42nd Avenue and the Cully Boulevard Alliance, have leveraged their modest budgets to help small BIPOC-owned businesses to start up and expand. And these successes, impressive as they are, have not stemmed the tide of displacement. These organizations have demonstrated that they can make excellent use of resources. Unfortunately, there's not enough resources. Displacement continues to grow, threatening Cully's cherished diversity. We urgently need to scale up our investments in a large, community-led framework. Thus it was that 4 years ago next month, representatives from 7 of our community organizations met with Prosper Portland staff to begin exploring a Cully TIF district led by the Cully community. Yesterday, I reread the notes from that first meeting. In it, we articulated the vision of a community-led development district that would preferentially benefit people of color and low-income people, preventing their displacement and helping them to thrive in Cully. Today, we bring you a plan, a report, and a governance charter that we believe will bring about that vision. You see in those documents the results of 4 years of work by many people. Staff from Prosper Portland, the Portland Housing Bureau, the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, staff from the Cully community organizations, community volunteers, and paid consultants. Many thousands of hours have been invested to develop this unique proposal. Going back for a moment to that October 2018 meeting, we articulated a vision of what we hope to do. Let me quote from it. We know how TIF funds have been used in the past in the city of Portland. We think it's a tool that can be flipped on its head. How will this money be used? Decisions will be made by the community to make sure renters, mobile homeowners, small business owners decide what investments to make, unquote. The Community Leadership Committee, composed largely of people vulnerable to displacement from Cully, will co-create investment proposals with city staff. There is one missing piece for that to happen, and that is the funding for community-based staff to support the Community Leadership Committee. This was left unfinished in the rush to complete the work this year, and we look forward to addressing the council on this point. As Winston Churchill told the world in 1941, give us the tools and we'll finish the job. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to close first. Thank you for your time tonight. As you can see, this has been kind of a lengthy process in the making. We started in person, went virtual, came back in person. It's actually exciting to get to be back together in person. So with that, we're going to request that the Planning and Sustainability Commission take action tonight to recommend that you find the TIF district in conformance with the comp plan and that you recommend it forward for City Council consideration in November. And we're happy to answer questions. I think we can just tag team depending on who the question's for.
Great. Thank you. We had one person sign up to testify, and I see that person neither in person nor online. So I think we're done. We would close what? Sorry?
Patricia D. Finderfer, I was just say maybe if you could just call the name just in case. Yeah.
Kyle Johnson. Nope. We know Kyle. So we will close oral testimony and written testimony. And Jeff, go for it.
Thank you. Lisa, I did have a question before the Prosper team signs off. There was a lot of discussion about how this is a new model of TIF, a different kind of TIF, and I certainly appreciate the huge community involvement. We're seeing that more and more with planning projects that come before us, and it's a great thing. I mean, it really makes sure that those of us involved in some level of decision making or advising know we've got a feel for what the community wants. So that aspect of the plan is really great, and I applaud everyone who put in the effort to get it there and create this kind of new model for TIF. There's one thing I want to make sure I've thought this through. What's missing from this plan, unlike other urban renewal plans, is that there's not a detailed project list. I mean, in past plans, correct me if I'm wrong, there's always been a capital improvement list, a budget, estimated costs, and that was sort of the backbone of prior plans, whether they ended up being good plans, bad plans, destructive plans, but they started with a capital improvement plan so the public knew what was going to get funded with their dollars. Because I think one way to look at this is a $350 million plan that takes $350 million from the general fund. These are tax dollars that would normally go into the city's general fund. And we are saying collectively, no, we think a better use of this $350 is this really great focus plan on Cully. And so I guess my question, thinking about one of the stewards of the larger city, is to be sure that $350 million is spent in a fiscally prudent way, in a way that accomplishes these great goals. I mean, the goals are admirable, and the work that's been done to lay out the goals and where you hope this plan goes is all great. So I guess my long-winded question is, where's the accountability come in spending the money? What's the larger community assurance that the $350 million that's being diverted from the general fund to Cully is we're all collectively, everyone in Cully, as well as the community, the city at large, how are we going to have the assurance that the money is spent effectively to achieve the goals? Because all we have now is goals and policy objectives, and they're well thought out and they're admirable. But until we know the money's being spent, what's the benchmark? What's the confidence that says, is every funding decision going to have to come back to Prosper Board and City Council? How's this going to work on the actual spending of money?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll take a stab on the Prosper side and then see if Matthew has things to add on the housing side. So there's a couple of, I just want to, particularly since it's a public discussion, so Jeff, if you look at other TIF plans, they have both and. So they rarely have a very specific project. They may have large sites, but they always have categories like housing, like transportation, like economic development in them. So this is consistent with that. I would say the thing that is distinct and unique is the intentional centering of priority communities in the language about how we go about making those investments and who's benefiting from those investments. So if you look at other TIF plans, whether that's the Central East Side to Gateway, you'll see there are categories similar to the ones that Matthew shared of housing, of economic development. The thing that is distinct is very often there are very particular sites that TIF was intended to be spent on within those plans. So this does not have a specific site listed as a specific project for investment. So that's the other thing I just want to make sure, because given that we are in the middle of conversations with taxing jurisdictions, I want to acknowledge that the $350 million is a maximum indebtedness, and it in fact impacts other taxing jurisdictions. So it is not unique to the city. In fact, one of the things that TIF does as a tool is it kind of allocates for some period of time under certain conditions. There's kind of a whole model that sits down at the state, but it takes property tax cash flow and it allocates it to housing and affordable housing and economic development activities over a period of time that otherwise could have gone to the county and the schools, mostly down to the state school fund, but also to Portland Public Schools. And so that's the very real conversation we're having with them is what are the trade-offs that they're looking at over a 30-year period, given that there's forsaken revenues to them. So I want to be super clear. Thank you, Matt. The specific number of impact to the general fund is about $115 million to the general fund over a 30-year period. And that is, my finance folks would be upset with me if I didn't say that is all based on a model of how we issue debt over time over the 30 years. So I wanted to get on record those thoughts. In terms of how the money is going to be stewarded going forward, I do want to ultimately, the stewardship responsibility still resides with Prosper Portland and PHB. The annual budget for this TIF district, if it's approved, would be considered on our side by a community budget committee that looks at all of our TIF districts. They would review that on an annualized basis. That budget allocation would go through to council in terms of through our board and up to council for ultimate approval. And then we still have our loan guidelines for how we would do small business lending or commercial property lending. We have our loan guidelines, and those would still apply here. Our grant kind of guidelines would still apply here. Large investments would still go as a recommendation to our board as they do today. The distinct nature of this would be that we would co-create that recommendation with the committee to go forward to our board. Hopefully that answers the question of kind of the internal procedures. Procurement and spending would continue to be in place. It's just the way that we would do the work with the committee would be distinct.
I'd also add that I think this is just the next step in the evolution of TIF. When Mayor Hales originally allocated the $20 million to start the Northeast Housing Strategy, the $20 million did not have granted, the TIF district was already established, but it did not have a defined project list. The direction that the Housing Bureau received from City Council was to go out into community, establish a process, establish an oversight committee, and figure out what programming the community is interested in. And that extended beyond the $20 million after City Council adjusted the TIF set-aside policy and shifted a significant portion of resources from the Prosper budget in the interstate corridor urban renewal area into the Housing Bureau budget. And we were able to increase the size of the Northeast Housing Strategy to over $80 million from the original 20. And again, we went out and worked with the community, worked with our oversight committee to establish a plan for how to appropriate those funds across different programs. We went back and submitted that to council. It was accepted by council. And then each year, the check, the accountability is both through our reports to our oversight committee on the successful or not successful implementation of our programs, as well as our reporting back to City Council during the budget cycles.
Great. Thank you. Oriana, and then Eli. Oh, sure.
Just for process, maybe they made a plan otherwise, but I would love to invite Vivian and Maria back up. Part of co-creating means sharing the hot seat with everyone during Q&A, if that's all right. Thanks.
Thank you. Oriana?
Yeah, I think I'm going to ask kind of the opposite question that Jeff did, which is better understanding accountability in the reverse direction, as opposed to from the TIF district to the broader public in Portland, but to better understand the accountability to the community members who are in co-creation around recommendations. Help me better understand if City Council can fund something that was not recommended by the community leadership body, and how those recommendations have accountability for what community is recommending or not recommending.
You want to go for it first? No.
Well, I'll take a first attempt at the question. This was a long discussion in the process. This was a discussion that happened over months around where true decision making rests. And in the end, I think I don't know that everyone was happy, but I think that we all accepted that true decision making, in the end, either rests with the Prosper Portland board, although primarily with the Portland City Council. They are responsible for adopting a budget, and a budget is what funds programs and is what would implement the TIF district plan. And so, through the process, I feel like we came to a place of agreement on a governance charter that established the framework and establishes a body, community oversight body, and then a framework by which the agencies themselves will work with the community and the community oversight body to co-create these 5-year action plans, and then to oversee the implementation of the action plans, which will contain the programs. And I will let the community representatives speak to kind of where they landed in this process. I don't know that everyone got everything they wanted out of the overall governance proposal, but I think we reached a compromise that we could accept and a compromise that we could build off of. And in the end, yes, I think we all acknowledge that a future city council could make a decision to fund a program that is not in the 5-year action plan, or to adjust the program allocations within the 5-year action plan. And at that point, the agencies, the community, the oversight committee's opportunity is direct engagement with council itself.
Thanks so much for the question. I think that this is a point of great consternation for community members, at least, and I applaud all the community members who continue to dare to dream of a reality that's very different than the type of governance that we have now, and really feel empowered to have greater decision making in the structural components and policies that govern their lives and then what they experience on a day-to-day level. However, there's a lot of trust that was placed in this idea of a firmer, more well-developed 5-year plan in which community members could not only begin to interact with this new governance body, but also commit themselves to a greater level of leadership development within their own communities, recognizing they had to not only scale up their understanding of how these governance structures, this new way of decision-making works, but also how to bring other community members in and up through that process, so that there would be this really strong leadership development component that would be integral to the success of this sort of governance plan.
So I'm just going to build on that. I do ultimately, we had a lot of conversations about decision making, and I would encourage you. I would encourage you to read the governance charter, because I think there's actually language in there that walks through. We tried to walk through all scenarios. Actually, as a group, we tried to walk through all scenarios together, including the possibility that ultimately the resources are council's resources to they are our budget authority. But it did think about what does a healthy relationship and partnership look like in terms of notification, so it does not come as an absolute decision, that the decision resides with them, but it does speak to notification, communication, and that there would be the opportunity for a direct avenue of communication between the community leadership committee and council, if that is a directive that we receive as Prosper Portland or as PHB. But I would encourage the governance charter. It is contemplated, I think, in there. There's one avenue of, should council decide to allocate funds directly to a project that is not in the action plan, what happens?
Thank you. Go to Katie and then Eli.
Yeah, that's a good question, Ariana. I'm not exactly sure I got a really answer. I'm not as up on these shifts, etc. But I would maybe I have another question, but maybe at the end could take another stab at that. I think Oriana was really asking, could the city council overrule the committee, the decision-making committee? And I think that could be answered in a little simpler way. What I wanted to ask, though, was I was thinking about how, and I appreciate all the questions that are being asked. I find this plan really exciting, and I think it could have a really huge and wonderful effect on Cully. I was wondering, though, we were looking at a plan not that long ago, the West Portland Center Plan, and it doesn't have any funding for housing. And I was just trying to think through whether is there any competition? I mean, it seems to me that that's one of the difficulties with making decisions about where resources go. And is there any competition for resources here, or is it are they completely separate? Would the fact that projects are going to go into Cully, is that going to have any impact on whether the West Portland Center Plan is able to find they're looking for affordable housing in that neighborhood for some very specific populations? That's my question.
I'll answer the first question first, which is yes, City Council can overrule the recommendation of the Community Oversight Committee, in addition to the Bureau's recommendation as well. When it comes to where funds are appropriated for this proposal, the Bureaus and the Oversight Committee have recommendation, and Council will decide via the budget process. So hopefully that's a clear answer. To the second question, will be a TIF. If Council passes this, it will be a TIF district. The funds will be geographically restricted to the boundaries of the TIF district, so they have to be spent within the TIF district. They are funds that would not be available for other outside of the comment around the general fund. They would be funds that would not be available for use in other areas of the city. And then maybe this is also a part of your question around competition. At this point, the Cully community members, the community coalition, is the only community that's approached the city and worked with the city to say, we want this. We've worked with you. We've come up with a proposal. We want to take it to City Council for consideration. There are some discussions happening in East Portland where community is coming together and they're engaging with the community representatives that worked on the Cully work. We'll see where that goes. And certainly there is a limit on the percentage of the city's area that can be a TIF district. But with with Cully and then with the East Portland conversations at this point, this is the only one where the city has been asked to move through this process, and where a proposal has been put together that we're taking to City Council for consideration.
Commissioners Patricia Diefenderfer, I might just add a little bit since Commissioner Larsell had a question specifically about the West Portland Town Center.
I'm sorry, Patricia, I couldn't understand you.
Sorry,
I'm not sure if other people can or not.
Am I too close to the mic? Can you hear me now? It's okay? Okay. I just wanted to address your question about the West Portland Town Center specifically. So as I think Matt explained, this is an area where there's a TIF obviously being considered. The community, as he noted, approached the city about this. In the West Portland Town Center area, no, it's not working?
It works for a while, but then I think you start talking more quickly or get closer or something. Something's happening.
Okay. Yeah. Oh gosh. Okay. I don't know if that's gonna. Can you hear Can you hear me now? Let me come over here a little bit. Okay. All right. How's this? Is this better? No? Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
it's
Okay.
better.
So I think the difference in the West Portland Town Center is that a TIF urban renewal tax increment financing district was something that I think was in conversation at some point through the process, but at this time that is not under consideration. I think the question of competition, because as Matt described, the TIF funds can only be used in the geographic area. There isn't competition in that respect, but certainly there are needs across the city, and the general fund and the normal ways in which we fund, community needs as it relates to affordable housing, business stabilization. Those are all, there's a limited amount of funds for all of those projects. So it's not competition for this with this particular area, but there is certainly a need, across the city.
I want to pause very briefly. I know that we are over time for the Floodplain Resilience Plan. So for those who have signed up to testify, thank you so much for your patience on this. Eli?
Thank you. And I think there is, I'm not going to go into it now, but there is some level of competition because only a certain percentage of the city can be encumbered in a TIF district at any one time. But I have a totally different question. So first of all, huge appreciation to people of all the work on bringing this together. I served on ICRAC for many years ago, and I can't think how differently that project would have been if it had been led in the way this one is being led today, in much positive. I had one big question, as a surprise, I guess, from this, which is the recommendation for the fee split for where the funds would go to. There was such a strong thread for housing and internet displacement, and the recommendation is to do the statutory minimum 45% for affordable housing with 55% for economic development. I would have guessed it would be a different percentage based on the testimony we received, and also based on a slide that Lisa shared where it showed that in the next 5 years, rents are likely to increase in multifamily more than twice as fast as they are, twice as much over the next 5 years than they are in the business sector, 15% versus 33%. I do housing, so I have a particular knowledge of that area, so I'll express that. But there is something to be said for a TIF district having the investment still be around 30 years later when the district gets to the end, and that you can assure that with housing because it's regulated for 3 times longer than that. So I'm interested in the thinking behind why we're seeing housing at the mandatory 45% rather than more. Thanks.
So that was primarily from feedback from the focus groups with community members, specifically the priority community groups, and what we heard from them was that they also wanted to see that economic development there.
I guess I should say there's no question that we need both. I'm just trying to figure out how we got to this. Portland clearly in its state in your TIB, we have a minimum of 45% for housing, so that's you're required to do that. I don't know whether there was any decision any contemplation of going higher than that, and still obviously having many millions for economic development.
There was a lot of discussion about it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it was 45% on the housing, and then 45% on the economic development, with that middle 10% based on the priorities that come up in each action plan.
Okay, that helps a little bit. The table didn't show that, what you just described. That was in the draft report.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say, because I think particularly like in Northeast, if you actually look at resources that Prosper administers via the non-set aside, we actually pass through some of those resources so that there's a higher level of income folks are eligible for PHB's home ownership, home repair programs, because otherwise they cap out based on the set aside. So we actually, part of that 10%, I would say, it can float based on the action plan priorities for any given 5 years. The other thing I would say is, and part of it could also be committed to PHB programs but not be part of the set aside, kind of the obligated set aside constraints around income levels, knowing that particularly as home ownership prices rise, it can kind of cap out folks who are more like at 80% MFI or 100% MFI from tapping into PHB's programs. And so that's the way we've done it in Northeast is we actually resource a certain amount of PHB's programs for higher income folks.
Okay, so I don't want to belabor this for this meeting. Obviously, it's consistent with the consolidated plan, but I wonder whether table 11 should be amended before it goes to City Council to match what you've just described. Because right now the draft says 319 million, sorry, 143 million for affordable housing, 45% minimum, and 175 million for economic development, 55%.
We will make sure, because in all other presentations, we've been super clear that it's a 45% with like a up to 55%, and that we'd administer it depending on kind of the priorities of the action plan at the time.
Thank you. I'm sure that our curiosity is endless for something that has had 4 years. I'm curious, are there any other questions that are mission critical to be able to make an informed vote this evening? Okay, seeing none, I would love to entertain a motion, and I wonder if someone could put that motion on the screen so that we can make sure that it is Loctite. Or you could just set it and we could say, yes, that. Nick? Okay, or you could say it and someone could read it. We can also say yes, that. Thank you, Nick.
Action and next steps is to find that the Cully TIF district plan conforms to the City of Portland comprehensive plan.
On the mic.
Find that the Cully TIF district plan conforms to the City of Portland comprehensive plan, and recommend that City Council adopt the Cully TIF district plan and report.
I would make that motion.
Great. Would anyone like to second? Jesse would love to second. JP, could you call the roll?
Certainly. Commissioner Gittemeyer.
Yes, and thank you so much to staff and community members for working on this. I'm hopeful that we can see this process occur in other bureaus as well.
Commissioner Chair Routh.
There are a lot of things to celebrate about this. I've been thinking as you were talking about urban renewal areas having harmed, that that what can be poison can also be medicine, and this is a wonderful day. So I vote aye. Thank you all so much.
Commissioner Spivak.
I would like to vote aye to support this, and for a risk that we don't get to do comments about our letter, would suggest that we follow up on the suggestion to request community-based staffing to help implement the program as we convey this to council. Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
I vote yes. I support this. I think that it complies with the comp plan, and the term community involvement doesn't really do justice to the process that unfolded. And I think that the process of co-creation really sets a new bar for what that can look like. Thank you.
Commissioner Larcell.
Yeah, I vote yes. It's a really interesting plan. I look forward to seeing how it plays out.
Commissioner Magnera.
Commissioner Manera votes aye, and I would like to echo the appreciation to everybody who's involved over a long process, especially the community members who put in a lot of time and a lot of trust into what may come out of this work. I do want to second Commissioner Spivak's suggestion in ensuring that the community involvement side of things is supported throughout the life of this program. And also to suggest that our letter just includes some discussion of that issue of accountability. I want to acknowledge that Commissioner Backrack and I have perhaps slightly different perspectives, but that I do think it is important to acknowledge that there is that disconnect between co-creation from the community perspective and what council may ultimately decide. If this body is willing to recommend to council that there be some commitments towards supporting community recommendations and not necessarily throwing anything else out there, I think that might be a prudent thing for this body to name, to ensure that that spirit of co-creation and the trust that communities put in this process is indeed borne out through the life of the program, but also just do want to acknowledge that Commissioner Backrack may have a slightly different perspective based on his question.
And finally, Commissioner Backrack.
Well, first, let me say I like this new order of taking votes where I go last instead of first. So thank you to whoever reconfigured that. Yes, I will support it. I believe it complies with the comprehensive plan. Some of the other comments, as Oriana said, I'd like to see a final letter. I guess if we're going to get into comments beyond the basic question, I would like to just quickly, and I'm sorry to do this, to follow up on what Katie raised, which was the West Portland Town Center plan, because that plan strikes me a lot like this, in that there was a deep community involvement, a lot of outreach, a lot of people put lots of time into it. And unfortunately, it sort of fell apart at the end because light rail died. And we were told without any explanation, it couldn't be urban renewal. We never really learned why. I don't know if it's technical, political, whatever, but that plan, not only did it have an equal level of community involvement and very similar goals. Their desires of that community look a lot like the desires of Cully, but they also had an action plan that had specific projects they thought would, catalyze development, projects that they thought were essential to maintaining, the feel of the community. And so I wish we had seen more of that in this plan. I mean, a lot of great work obviously went into Cully, but it would certainly, from my fiscal perspective, give me a lot more comfort if the community had thought through what exactly are the projects that are going to help them achieve the goals. And so I'm disappointed, thinking back to West Portland Town Center, we couldn't have found a way to help move that plan a little bit further along. So in any event, I will support the letters. And
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Woo. Thank you.
So Nicholas Starn again, I just wanted to touch bases. I can take a first stab at writing up a letter. I got some notes for things to put in that, if that's okay. Is there anyone I should work with on point? I heard a request that one of the commissioners wants to see it, but is there anyone I should work with, Chair?
Oriana. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Okay. Thanks to everyone. And with that, let's go to our next, which is the Floodplain Resilience Plan. And we have Sally Edmonds and Jeff Cottle coming up.
And Chair, while they're coming up,
Yes, please, Jeff.
I'm going to be recusing myself, so I'll go ahead and sign off. I think this is our last item for the evening, isn't it?
Great. Yes.
Okay. So
Okay.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. And totally. But maybe before, does anyone else have any disclosures while we're setting up on the Floodplain Resilience Plan besides Jeff, who has just recused himself? Okay, great. Shall we let's take a 3-minute break. Cheers. are back and ready for the Floodplain Resilience Plan. Jeff and Sally, please take it away. Thank you so much.
Sure. So I'm going to, as I've been directed, to share my screen. So is that showing up? It's not showing up here, so I can't really tell.
I'm seeing it over here. Okay, so as soon as that comes down.
Okay. Working there.
Apparently you're coming through the mic well.
Okay. Oh, why? Thank you. Should I go ahead or should we? For some reason, not showing there.
Is it? Can we? There we go. There we go. Oh. Strange because I'm seeing it on my computer.
Can you? Aha. Yay. All right. So, yes, I'm Jeff Cottle with Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and I'm kind of managing this Floodplain Resilience Plan project. Hello, Commissioners. Thank you for having us back again. I'm joined by Sally Edmonds next to me, as the Commissioner said, and then also we have a few people virtually if we have questions after the testimony. And we have Caitlin Lovell from the Bureau of Environmental Services and Jason Butler-Brown from the Bureau of Development Services, and we have worked closely with them through this process with the Floodplain Resilience Plan. 2 weeks ago, we had a briefing on this project, and this is the follow-up to to gather public testimony. And today, we won't go into the details of the presentation of the plan necessarily. We'll do a little summary of what's in the plan, and then really provide you more with a summary of what we've heard so far, both through conversations with the public and also through testimony, and then just a little bit of follow-up from the questions that we had from the briefing from some of the commissioners. And then also just wanted to note that we did provide the staff report memo, and there's a little bit more detail in there, but it's similar types of information here, and this is kind of a distilled version of what was in there. So just briefly, as I said, we'll go through some of the kind of background very quickly and quickly talk about what's in the plan, although we went to more detail in the briefing. So just quickly, the expectation is that the FEMA compliance for the FEMA biological opinion is expected for early 2027. As we said in our last the briefing, the biological opinion was released in 2016. The city's been working on that basically since its release. And again, we have an interbureau team that has been trying to coordinate on our response since then. This effort and our overall work plan implements a number of comprehensive plan policies and goals, and then also in terms of that overall schedule to meet the 2027 deadline, this sort of stepwise process specifically for the zoning code, for the regulatory piece of with the zoning code, that stepwise process is consistent with that long-term goal. We also have been basically, since the biological opinion was released, we've been meeting with FEMA to talk through our plans and ask questions and get input from them as well. Just quickly showing the areas that are the focus of the Floodplain Resilience Plan, what we're calling the combined flood hazard area. We have 6 waterways here, and this map shows those waterways and their adjacent flood hazard areas. just briefly what is made up or what makes up the combined flood hazard area. We won't go into the detail of this, but we have the FEMA 100-year floodplain. Metro, our regional government, has a 1996 flood inundation area, which we regulate specifically, mostly through the building code, but we use it as a flood hazard area. And then, as was discussed in the briefing, we have this new model that we have worked with the city staff at Bureau of Environmental Services, worked with the Army Corps of Engineers to develop, and it's basically an updated version of the 1996 flood. We're really determining, based on current conditions, development, topography, river bathymetry, et cetera, where we would expect flooding to happen with a 1996-like event. Like I said, I'm not going to go into the details of the specific areas. We went through each one last time, but just to highlight some of the things, the zoning code updates that we have. So riparian buffer area, adding a riparian buffer area and the associated requirements, which are already in place in the south reach to the central reach. Applying environmental zoning to beyond the riparian buffer areas, which is just in the central reach, applying environmental zoning, either river environmental along the Willamette or environmental conservation overlay zone to the undeveloped floodplain, and then really updating the minimum tree and vegetation management requirements for floodplains, and that's primarily in the environmental overlay zone. There are a few technical amendments, just sort of clarifications in the south waterfront area and sort of partnered with some of the tree and vegetation management changes, and then just some minor things throughout the code for the combined flood hazard area primarily to reference the combined flood hazard area. So just a little bit about what we have heard thus far. So the proposed draft was released on August 30th, and so we've since then received about 50 calls. We responded to 50 calls, 15 emails. Just some of the topics, I would say mostly it's just clarification on what is the proposal for our particular property, because we do have different things going in different parts of the city. Concern about the potential implications of the building code updates if those were to move forward, and implications related to what would be required with the building code updates, which we talked about in the briefing. Some questions about the riparian buffer area, which is, like I said, proposed for the central Willamette River Central Reach, and in terms of what is required to meet those requirements. And then a few property-specific kind of questions about both floodplain and then also application of environmental overlay zone. The river environmental overlay zone. So in terms of testimony, through the MAP app, we've taken testimony, and thus far we have 28 pieces of testimony. Most of that testimony has been in support of the plan. In addition, though, there's been a desire to go further with that, include specifically moving forward, the request to move forward with the Title 24, the building code updates, and not wait on that, and then also the urgency related to the industrial lands and the economic opportunities analysis, which again we spoke about previously. To follow up a couple of things that were discussed at the briefing, and that's also captured in the memo, the staff report memo that we provided. Just again, our mitigation requirements, primarily based on an avoid, minimize, mitigate approach. So the first step is you have to show that you have avoided. Where you can't avoid, you minimize impacts, and then where you can't minimize, and once you have minimized, then you mitigate anything that is unavoidable. And as we discussed, on-site mitigation is prioritized, but there are options for off-site if you own another property, have control of it, or there is potential for mitigation banks. But as we discussed last time, there are no habitat mitigation banks right now that are available to offset your impacts. There again we're having discussions related to a future bank, a mitigation bank that would involve the city in some way or another. Still looking at what the structures might be and the funding, but at the OMS as a part of the OMSI redevelopment. And then just a note that flood storage capacity mitigation banks, based on our conversations with stakeholders and also with Bureau of Development Services, would be an important piece of the building code project once it moves forward. Another quickly, just another topic that was, or question was asked about what is the breakdown in terms of where the areas that are affected by our proposals. And this is just a simple chart that sort of breaks it down and really focus. You could look at basically the number of tax lots in acres. Primarily, a big portion of the tax lots are single dwelling residential, and then we have a good number of commercial and mixed use within those zoning categories. Open space, because that's where we have a lot of environmental overlay zones in open space, so that also accounts for a large amount of the land that in terms of where these changes would take place. So we just wanted to, we're not making any votes or anything today, but just wanted to be clear about what is proposed in terms of what is expected as a part of this process. The PSC would recommend that City Council adopt proposed zoning amendments. And again, this is highlighted in your memo, but just these 5 chapters of the zoning code, just highlighted those because those are really where a lot of the bulk of the changes or the important, specific response to the FEMA BIOP, where those changes are targeted. And then also we have in the document an action plan which goes beyond just the regulatory pieces, but what other actions can the city take, or what other things can we do with partners, community partners or other jurisdictions to make sure to implement the changes we want to see and to restore floodplains moving forward. And so with that, we just had the schedule. So tonight, public hearing. We have a work session October 25th, and then also another one on November 22nd. Today, as we assume, the oral testimony portion of this hearing will end, but then we will looking to have written testimony continue to be available through Friday. And yes, so right now we expect that we would be at City Council hopefully in the spring of 2023 with these changes. So with that, if you have any questions.
Questions, Jesse?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. If you could maybe summarize a little bit of this for me. So some of the comments say that this may not be compatible with the ESA and that it has some overlap there with whether or not we're going to be protecting salmon, steelhead, and resident killer whales. Could you explain that a little bit and how this plan will or will not comply with the ESA on that?
Yeah, so I guess try not to get too technical in the process, but so one of the things to note is that the biological opinion is specifically a conversation between 2 agencies, federal agencies. So, but the determination that was made as the biological opinion was that the National Flood Insurance Program was not compliant with the Endangered Species Act. And so the things that are in the biological opinion are things that National Marine Fisheries Service recommends. So there were some details in the short term, and then just a larger sort of criteria, sort of almost like approval criteria of what is expected long term that to make it comply with the Endangered Species Act. So these changes, the aim is to continue to comply with the expected changes for the National Flood Insurance Program, but it also, it does have it is related to Endangered Species Act, the Endangered Species Act, because that is the underlying reasoning for these recommendations that are coming from FEMA and originally from the National Marine Fisheries Service.
Okay, so is this on? Can you hear me? So is there a concern that this will put endangered species at risk if we go ahead and pass this right now and allow development to get through under these policies? Is it something that we should be trying to do more stricter regulation on at the local level, or is it something that we're just leaving up to the federal government to figure out and then we kind of adjust as necessary? I know that might be too much of like a complex down the line question, but.
Well, no, I would say this would move us more to be able to say that we are more compliant with the Endangered Species Act on a general level, because we are taking those recommendations from the National Marine Fisheries Service and are incorporating it into the proposals that we have as a part of this plan. The biological opinion itself, as we've discussed, combine both sort of this habitat piece and the flood storage capacity. So once both of these projects come, we are not technically required to be compliant right now with those changes, but once those two changes are made to be consistent, and part of the process, I guess we haven't really talked about it, but we would submit sort of a package to FEMA that would say, this is collectively, there are different paths that we would use to demonstrate that, but we would submit a package to FEMA to say, this is our approach to meeting those, to be compliant with these requirements. Okay. And this is how the different pieces come together to demonstrate compliance. And they would approve that.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Oriana?
Yeah, so I'm going to ask a complex down the road question as well. And this one is, how did you take into account future potential changes in terms of river levels that may be related to climate? And how did you weigh this in terms of the conditions of the city now versus the conditions that we're likely to see in the future as climate change worsens?
Yeah, thanks. That's a good question. I think what I would say is that this new model that we have is trying to do a little bit more to recognize the limitations of the FEMA 100-year floodplain, and even, to be honest, the limitations of the existing Metro 1996 flood inundation area, because it was the extent of that map was just based on an aerial photo after the day after the peak of the 1996 flood. So that new model that the Bureau of Environmental Services worked on is really trying to capture at least a little bit of that, because we assume that floods like 1996 will be more common. One of the things, though, is, well, in theory, FEMA, climate change was included in some of the directives in the biological opinion. It's currently unclear how they're going to address that specifically. But in the future, we could, as a city, do the same type of modeling to think about what is the climate change scenario. We don't necessarily need to depend on other entities, but we don't currently have a plan for that. But there is a lot of work to prepare for climate change throughout the city, for sure.
Thank you. Katie?
Yeah, I was just wondering, are we doing question that? Because I can ask my question later. Are we going to do the open the have the hearing now, or? But I do have a question.
Yeah. I wonder if we can keep it to clarifying questions of the presentation, and then go to larger topics afterwards. Does that? Katie, would you like that? Is it a clarifying?
I don't know. It's clarifying for me. I was, it's actually, my question was, why is all the testimony saying, don't remove the Title 24 amendments? Does the report do that? Or are they just saying that proactively? I didn't quite get that.
Sure. So I think the reason why there's those comments is because we had proposed Title 24 changes in the discussion draft along with zoning code changes. Prior to the release of the proposed draft, we decided that it was best to split those out, because technically the building code is the purview of the Bureau of Development Services and generally goes through a different process, although we recognize that sometimes there are changes in other titles that sort of are connected to or supported or sort of comprehensively a good thing to do to go along with other work that we do at the Planning and Sustainability through the Planning and Sustainability Commission. But that's really the expectation is that would go through a different process.
That somewhere else? And that's odd for me, because in the past, as the Planning and Sustainability Commission, we looked at the whole plan. And does that mean you're going to? And I was wondering about this when I was looking at the plan. I was thinking, now that we're going to be planning, not planning and sustainability, we're going to be just planning. Are we going to be just looking at little pieces of plans? Just kind of, those, and I know this is not part of this hearing, but I'm curious about that, very curious about that. And I think and I felt, honestly, like that might be a mistake, because I think we should see the whole plan. How are we going to know if the things that we're passing on to city council, what their real impact is going to be, if the plan's all sliced and diced according to which bureau it's going to be in front of? It's you don't have to even answer that question, but that's one that I'm going to keep pushing as we go forward.
Commissioners, Patricia Diefendorfer, maybe I could just take a short shot at answering just the question of, I think that we use the term plan in this case, and it's a little bit confusing because it's different than some of our other plans. In this case, when we refer to the Floodplain Resiliency Plan, it's kind of referring to a multi-bureau, multi-phase action plan. And all of these steps, all of these discrete actions are steps as part of the action plan. So I don't think that we're not going to, we're not separating them out, and it's not that we will not be seeing whole plans come forward together to provide the full picture. It's that the building code, the Title 24 building code provisions they're in the building regulations of the municipal code. They're very technical, related to cut and fill. And it is not something, it's something that takes a different process to amend that code. And so the thought here is that those changes will accompany, they're part of this overall action plan, they will occur, and they will go through their codified process, and these changes will go through its codified process, which is to come here to the Planning and Sustainability Commission. So they're not being disconnected. They're just simply each taking their own path. And I think that's why also one of the actions is the resolution to, sort of commit to the full plan, because the full plan is the collection of all these pieces. And staff can feel free to correct me if I'm mischaracterizing that, but that's my understanding of the process.
I guess I might just provide a little bit of a nuance. So I think I want to be clear that the Floodplain Resilience Plan, so what Patricia was referring to is our overall work plan. So we, which we discussed previously in the briefing, in 2019, the bureau directors of 8 city bureaus agreed to this long-term plan that identified multiple pieces and multiple updates that, with the intent to collectively ensure our compliance with the biological opinion. And so there are distinct pieces that go along with that. And as I said, we have Bureau of Environmental Services working on floodplain restoration, and they've been very kind of critical in the mitigation banking component that also supports this work. There's the building code component, but they are separate because we don't. So, for example, when a project comes, they have to meet building code over here. They have certain people they talk to about building code. They have certain people who talk about zoning code, and we manage the zoning code, and so it's. Originally, we were looking at them together because it is sort of the overall aim, and we expected them to kind of follow the same schedule, but we have decided for process reasons to split that out, and because again, it is the responsibility of the Bureau of Development Services, that building code. It's similar to the Stormwater Management Manual is the purview of Bureau of Environmental Services. They don't necessarily come to the Planning and Sustainability Commission to approve that. It's a similar process because it's kind of an administrative process for approval or changes.
Katie, thank you for asking that question. Thank you for this. I have a feeling it is a preview of coming attractions for a larger ongoing conversation. And I wonder if there are any other clarifying questions before we begin oral testimony. No? Okay, great. Then in that case, I would love to bring up, so in order, just We're going to start with folks who are online, and we will do 3 minutes. I don't think that you can see my hand, so I will just maybe go ding at 30 seconds. And that's where we're going to go. And we will start, if you don't mind, Cassie Cohen. Can you hear us? Can we hear you?
I was hoping not to go first, but I'll do it.
Thank you for your sacrifice.
Okay, Cassie Cohen, she, her pronouns, the executive director of Portland Harbor Community Coalition. I guess, this is so high level and so hard to understand. We didn't even attempt to engage our coalition members around it. There were a couple of workshops or online workshops that I participated in, but mostly I've been relying on community folks who have, training in this stuff to better understand this issue. But it definitely addresses, this affects the Superfund site, and that's what our coalition works on and around, and I have some concerns. So I am disappointed that BPS has eliminated or delayed substantial portions of the work that was contained in the, in the discussion draft from 2021 of the Floodplain Resilience Plan. So as I believe that, the plan as presented to you today does need to be strengthened. And I do have concerns. I don't fully support it in its current form. The Portland Floodplain Resilience Plan may be contributing to the delay of bringing necessary environmental and climate resilience balance to industrial lands, along with other plans like the North Reach River Plan, Portland Tree Code, Willamette Greenway updates, and unfortunately, it can mean more gaps in really important critical decision making associated with the Portland Harbor Superfund process. So that raises flags for me. It was great to hear of this co-creation process for the previous presentation for the Cully TIF district, but I'm not sure that this process has necessarily been the same, so I have picked up on some familiar patterns of that, have come up over decades with governments. So, I guess challenged translation of technical concepts that really do hold important decisions that makes it really hard for community members to understand. The delayed or eliminated important environmental changes. If it goes, sometimes it feels, it may just be a perception, but it seems like there is pressure coming from industry or, commercial entities, and that really is what's behind those delays.
Thank you.
Or changes.
Cassie, could I ask you, do you wrap?
Did I go over? Is it
just
only
a tiny bit.
seconds?
But, please finish your thought.
Oh, okay. I didn't know how long. I'm sorry. I guess, let's see, to blame other agencies for lack of progress on deliverables, FEMA in this case, I believe the city can set higher standards and can do so rapidly and act on it. Asking, community for feedback, but not integrating the majority of community recommendations, that's concerning. So, and I just worry that this may continue to harm fish and wildlife because it's not making the necessary changes and fast enough. So I do have the same questions that Commissioner Larcell brought up, just mostly that I feel like, what's the harm of having the Title 24 in here, even if, it's happening with another bureau, and you're working collaboratively. So I feel that that should be restored. I think
Cassie, I'm going to have to have you elapse your time.
Okay, I'll email.
Please
I'll
do.
email
And
my thoughts.
the written testimony is open until Friday.
Okay.
Thank you for
very
going
much.
first. I'm sorry
Yeah.
you didn't know that it was 3 minutes. So thank you. Sarah Taylor, are you here? Can we hear you?
I'm here indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, hi, my name is Sarah Taylor, and I live in the Linton neighborhood. I have been a Portland Public School principal, and I have delivered thousands of babies in the Portland area. So I am speaking on behalf and advocating for the children of the North Reach. As a midwife, I studied public health, and I became seriously concerned about what was happening in the lower Willamette River communities, what's happening maternal health wise in our schools, generational poverty. And I want to tell you, I want two things, and I'm going to try to be really clear. I want you to get rid of the heavy industrial zoning code. I do not believe that it is in any way compatible with the vision of the comprehensive plan. You cannot say in your heavy industrial zoning that some communities will have things that other people will find objectionable in their neighborhood, because the people who are getting the things that are objectionable happen to be the people in the North Reach. We have, as you know, the CI Hub, the Super Fund, most of the heavy industrial zoning. And I just want to make sure, and I've probably left out things, there's virtually no access. So I want to tell you, if a salmon cannot get through the North Reach, they cannot get to the Central and the South and those creeks that are on that map. And we are strongly advocating that this flood plan include the North Reach. I am with the Braided River campaign, which was supposed to be a short campaign to get the North Reach plan off the ground. We are 3 years into the EOA. I am convinced that you need to do the EOA, the Super Fund, the CEI Hub, the tribal fishing rights, all need to be wrapped in together. And doing these in a piecemeal way is not going to work and is really not good for the river and not good for the climate, and certainly not good for the people of North Portland, who are by far, people don't understand, Roosevelt High School is the most diverse high school in the city. It is a community with many low-income housing projects that are right on the river, that are on the floodplain. Actually, amazingly, you just built a huge low-income housing project on the floodplain. So you need to wrap these all in together. There's no reason why the EOA cannot be done in accord. It doesn't make any sense to me. Tell me, I forgot to turn on my timer, to not put in your floodplains and then put in your EOA. They want to do it the opposite. They want to do the EOA and then say, oh, now we can't do a floodplain. Whereas you do the floodplain, you follow the tribal treaties, and then you put in the EOA. So that's what I'm advocating for. And please, please look at the language in heavy industrial zoning and see if you think that's in any way compatible with the comprehensive plan values. And please, I want you to pass this, but I want you to also ask them to do the North Reach at the same time.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
And next, I'll go to Travis Williams. Travis, welcome.
Thank you, Chair and Sustainability Commission members. My name is Travis Williams, and I am the Riverkeeper and Executive Director for Willamette Riverkeeper. Our organization works throughout the Willamette River Basin to protect water quality and habitat. And certainly part of that work over the years has involved compliance with the Federal Endangered Species Act. I think Sarah actually just helped to really elucidate the complexity of some of these issues and the way things overlap to a point where I think the general public can just find this stuff exceedingly difficult to grasp. And as professionals in this realm, there's complexity as well. And I definitely support Sarah's concerns and Cassie's concerns related to this process. We do appreciate the work that the commission staff have put into the plan. In our view, the plan is really essential to creating a safe, healthy, and equitable river and ensures that the city will be in compliance, hopefully, with the Endangered Species Act protections. But the plan also goes a long way toward achieving the goals of protecting water quality, wildlife habitat, people and property, and hopefully leading to a landscape and riverscape that will be more effective in regard to dealing with climate change and the long-term impacts from that. I think the concerns we have really relate to the kind of slow pace that the city has taken in regard to this work and breaking it into multiple phases. For example, the south reach of the Willamette was updated a couple of years ago, and this phase only covers the central reach of the Willamette, Tryon Creek, and Fano Creeks. The city is still years away from updating floodplain protections in the North Reach, Columbia Slough, the Columbia River, and Johnson Creek. And leaving those very significant sections out until a later time to us doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially when we have this very involved process that has been going for many months and certainly longer to some degree. We also have a concern that has been previously mentioned by some of the commissioners and others that at what seems like the very last moment, the city removed some of the most important protections in a plan that was proposed, which is over 200 pages long and released on August 29th. All the changes to Title 24 were gone. And kind of echoing again some of the concerns that were voiced before, we believe you have the capacity to address this in your process rather than having to be part of really what is essentially would become another process. So I would just say, we appreciate the work that has gone forward. Things are, moving in the right direction, but to have these sort of critical lapses relatively late in the process is really problematic to Willamette Riverkeeper. So with that, in light of the overall timing of this evening, I appreciate the opportunity to testify and look forward to communicating more on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there a Christine Albertson in the house? Okay. We'll try to get her later or get them later. Next up, I have KPTV News, Renee France, and then Indigo Namkung. And I think this might be a first KPTV of if you are indeed a testifier. I think this might be a first. Okay, but they're not wanting to be promoted. So let us go on to, forgive me, Renee France, can we hear you? Okay. Renee? Okay, Renee, we will try to come back to you in just a moment. Indigo Namkun. Hello. Can we hear you?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Thank you.
Hi. All right, may I begin?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, commissioners. My name is Indy Namkun. I'm the coalition manager at 350 PDX. We're a local organization addressing the root causes of climate disruption through justice-based solutions, along with many of our partners and community members, some of whom called our attention to this hearing. We've helped to support and shape the city's climate emergency work for several years. The city has a clear commitment in the 2020 Climate Emergency Declaration to protect and restore floodplains to reduce flood impacts on public health, property, and infrastructure. We urgently need a floodplain resilience plan that follows through on that commitment. Our best available climate science indicates that the Portland area is going to continue to see warmer, wetter winters with the potential for more intense rain events and river flooding. We're already beginning to see some of this in our area. In cities across the United States, climate-induced extreme weather has met impervious landscapes to produce catastrophic flooding. Tonight, 7 counties in the Jacksonville, Florida area are under a mandatory evacuation order, anticipating extreme floods as Hurricane Ian prepares to make landfall later this week. These events across the country and here at home in our history with Vampart reliably level their most severe consequences at low-income Black, Indigenous, and communities of color. Our actions must respond to these realities and do so quickly. This plan has the potential to make Portland a leader in this response, and we do want to see our city rise to this challenge. But this won't happen if we capitulate to business interests that don't face the same risks. A decision to weaken this plan by removing key protections like the Title 24 amendments that hold developers accountable for managing and mitigating their impacts on our floodplains is fundamentally a decision about cost. When floodwaters rise and recede, who's left holding the bill? Are we asking developers to help set things right ahead of time when their business operations leave our communities more exposed to harm? Or are we kicking those costs down the road to our ecosystems, to salmon, to folks who rely on a healthy river, who live in basement apartments and low-lying properties because that's where they can afford the rent, who don't have the cash to evacuate or to replace their belongings? Who do we ultimately believe can afford to absorb this cost? Our communities can't negotiate with the climate crisis. So our leaders shouldn't choose to negotiate some of our best protections away against those events, or allow wealthy developers to saddle Portlanders with catastrophic flooding just to protect their profit margin. The city should advance the current plan in its entirety, including Title 24 amendments, and expedite updating those protections for the rest of the city, including the North Reach, the Columbia Slough, the Columbia River, and Johnson Creek that comprise some of our most important floodplains. This is the realistic and responsible way forward, and it's what our communities need to survive the crisis to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Renee France, can we hear you?
There we go. Apologies for earlier. My name is Renee France. I'm a land use attorney with Radler White Parks in Alexander. We represent the Zidell family, who owns the 33-acre riverfront property in the South Waterfront. The Zidells have remediated the site and will redevelop the site consistent with the city's plans for high-density mixed-use urban infill on this transit-rich site. The property is immediately adjacent to the Tillicum Crossing at the intersection of light rail, streetcar, bus line, greenway trail, bike, and pedestrian paths. The site is also part of the larger South Waterfront development that is more than half complete and already requires the largest building setback from the top of bank at 100 feet. Most, if not all, of our concerns are, to what we now understand, will be in the Title 24 building code amendment package that has been discussed at some length this evening with staff. Most notably, the South Waterfront is currently exempt from balance, cut, and fill. When Metro adopted its Title III, they wisely exempted the South Waterfront from balance, cut, and fill because they recognized the area was developed and committed to future development as a dense infill neighborhood in the central city, and that development of the area would not measurably impact floodplain storage capacity given the size of the watershed and the level of already existing development. The Title 24 amendments, as we understand it, would remove this exception, a change that will most certainly restrict significant development in that half-built area of the central city. You have likely seen the partially constructed Bond Avenue that is elevated well above the surrounding grade to meet the Tillicum Bridge elevation. This portion of Bond was not subject to balance, cut, and fill. If the rest of Bond is subject to balance, cut, and fill, this important public backbone to the South Waterfront may not be feasible to complete. there's little question that there will not be enough compensatory cut area in the south waterfront to balance the required fill. Zidell Yards is a remediated tap that cannot be excavated, and the balance of the south waterfront is largely developed. If the idea is to create an offsite fee and lieu program, the buy into that program must be known quantity with known mitigation sites that can accommodate the cut at a price and timeline that permits a feasibility finding. None of those findings are part of the current Title 24 package, which again is currently not in front of you. While we understand that the Title 24 amendments have been excised from this package, we have not been told when they will be proposed, how public comment will be invited, and whether there will be public hearings. Because these amendments are mission critical for further development of the South Waterfront, we request that they be included in this process and understand that we're not the only ones. If it is not required, at a minimum, we request clarity for those amendments from staff in terms of how that process will move forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I do not see Micah Mescal online, so I'll go to, unless he pops up later, happy to add, but would love to go to in-person testimony. Now, Bob Salinger and Daniel Rolfe. And you can see me, so when I hit 30 seconds, I'll go this. Oh, well, next time. Let's figure it out next time. No, thank you. Cool.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay? Is this on? Good evening. My name is Bob Salinger. I'm the Conservation Director for the Audubon Society of Portland. We were the lead plaintiff represented by Earthrise law firm on the lawsuit that resulted in the biological opinion that has triggered this entire process. We brought this lawsuit back in 2009, so we've waited a long, long time to get to this point. I'm here tonight to express disappointment in this plan. I hope to be here to express support for it. We would have been here to express support for it if the city had brought forward the discussion draft that was presented to the public many, many months ago. Unfortunately, that draft has been gutted. Healthy and intact floodplains are essential for the health and safety of our community, to protect water quality and to provide fish and wildlife habitat, and to provide resilience in the face of climate change. It should not take an Endangered Species Act lawsuit to inspire the city to move forward on floodplains. There are pages and pages in this plan that talk about the importance of floodplains and reference many, many city reports and proclamations and plans that talk and commit the city to protecting floodplains. We know we need to do it. We don't need Endangered Species Act violations to accelerate this. So how has this plan been gutted? First and foremost, you've already heard about Title 24. That's the balance, cut, and fill provisions. We believe that those are some of the most important provisions in this plan. We do not understand why the city has removed them. The two reasons we've heard: number one, that it's outside of the purview of the Planning Commission. As you've already heard, most plans in this city include the entire package. This is the first time we've seen a plan broken up like this, and we've been doing this for many, many years. Number two, we've heard there are not mitigation banks. Well, in fact, the city has been talking about doing a mitigation bank for decades. They've known this all through this entire process. They haven't gotten it done, but there are alternative mitigation banks in Portland that can serve this purpose. That is not a reason for not proceeding forward. Second issue, this plan does not cover significant portions of the city. The reason for that is because we don't have an updated economic analysis, EOA. We have now been hearing for over a decade that the city cannot move forward on doing environmental protections on industrial lands because we don't have an updated EOA for over a decade. We don't have the tree code. We don't have the E-zone updates. We don't have the North Reach River plan. It's undermined the Superfund process. It is inexcusable that the city is continuing to use the lack of an EOA as a reason for not advancing environmental regulations. Third issue I want to raise tonight, and I've covered several more in the letter I wrote today, is the city did have protections in the earlier draft for non-industrial floodplain areas in the Columbia Corridor. Those were removed so that the city could come back later and do the Columbia Corridor comprehensively. We have waited, again, for decades for the city to do a Columbia Corridor plan. There is absolutely no reason why the city cannot move forward on protections that have been identified, mapped, and were included in the prior plan. It is just a delay tactic at this point. So we very strongly urge you to move forward. We believe the city has legal exposure for violations of the Endangered Species Act by continuing to allow and permit development in floodplains that the NOAA Fisheries has determined harm salmon. So we encourage you to restore the pieces of this plan that were removed, advance it holistically, and then come back and finish the rest of this process in an expeditious manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel, welcome.
Hi, my name is Dan Rolfe. I'm on the faculty at Lewis and Clark Law School here in Portland. I'm also the co-founder and of counsel at Earthrise Law Center, which is the domestic environmental law clinic at Lewis and Clark. And in that capacity, I've represented many organizations over the years, including the organizations that brought the lawsuit against the Federal Emergency Management Agency to force that agency to consult with the National Marine Fisheries Service over its administration of the National Flood Insurance Plan. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the legal implications of decisions you're making or not making here at the Planning Commission. Really, from an Endangered Species Act standpoint, it's irrelevant how you slice and dice your process. The National Marine Fisheries Service issued a jeopardy biological opinion, finding that how FEMA was administering the National Flood Insurance Program here in Oregon jeopardized the continued existence of listed salmon and steelhead throughout the state. A jeopardy biological opinion is an incredibly rare creature, almost never issued by NIMS or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So when one pops up, one is best advised to pay a lot of respect to it. I'm surprised that FEMA isn't here essentially imploring the city to fully implement all the reasonable and prudent alternative measure elements in this biological opinion, essentially what the biological opinion says has to happen to avoid jeopardy. Because if FEMA doesn't do and ensure that jurisdictions within Oregon don't fully comply with the reasonable and prudent alternative, it is subject to what is rather a pretty easy lawsuit. You can staple a jeopardy biological opinion to a complaint and say, hey, the federal agency is literally jeopardizing the continued existence of these species. That's per se a violation of Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act. That biological opinion also includes what's called an incidental take statement, which insulates the city of Portland and its permittees from violations of Section 9 of the Endangered Species Act, the take prohibitions. And that's what Portland and its permittees need if they're operating in the floodplains. And so by taking or not taking action to fully implement the biological opinion, and balance, cut, and fill is in the biological opinion, the city of Portland, FEMA, are at real legal risk. So I encourage you to talk to your lawyers. You have really good lawyers that know about this stuff, and modify your actions and encourage FEMA to modify its actions to comply with biological opinion in the Endangered Species Act.
Thank you. Thank you all. Is there anyone present or online who has not had the opportunity to provide oral testimony who would like to do so at this time? Okay. Thanks to everyone who has provided oral and written testimony. We are closing oral testimony now. Written testimony will remain open until, and I will just want to get the date right because time is so relative these days, Friday, September 30th at 5 p.m. And with that, I'd love to go, if we could do a round robin popcorn style as folks have thoughts. Who'd like to kick us off? Erica, go for it.
I just wanted to thank again all of the testifiers who came in person and participated online. I'm grateful for the opinions that you expressed, and I think that some of them echoed some of the online testimony that I read earlier today, the submitted written testimony. And Jeff, in your presentation, you had summarized some of the key points that had come up in the testimony. And I think that what we've heard tonight and through the written testimony, there are a few themes that are missing. And so I would like to just state those as I understand them and as I heard them, because I think that it's really important that we as a commission understand where we're falling on some of these. So the first one is the community engagement piece. I do have concerns that this is just so technical that some people are not able to engage with the really important aspects of like our waterways and floodplain health in a way that is accessible and allows them to actually understand what's being proposed. There are some granular examples of that from people who felt like they got something in the mail. I think that there was one testimony that was written online that was like, I have been working as an architect for like 4 decades, and I didn't understand like what the implications would be for the property, or I didn't feel like I was appropriately notified. So that was a little bit of a concern for me. And then just some of the other themes that we heard, I think it was Cassie who pointed out just feeling like there was a contrast between what we saw with the co-creation process earlier and then feeling like there wasn't really a way to plug in and understand and provide meaningful feedback. So that was one. And then the Title 24, I think that the way that it was positioned in the slides was that there was feedback about it being delayed. But what I'm hearing is that it's not just concern about it being delayed, it's concern about the offsite mitigation components of that and the fact that it's just being fractured off as part of this plan. So I don't know if there's like a timeline that would assuage some of those concerns, because it sounds like a lot of the reticence is just with this being divided up. And then the third thing is the rest of the waterways. And we've heard a lot about the EOAs tonight. And I think that really coming to this relatively new, having an understanding of the history of that and where we are with that, and that we have this floodplain plan here that doesn't address like what seems like many of the waterways in the city, and what's going on with the industrial lands. Thank you.
Thank you. Eli?
Thank you, and thank you for the testimony, live and virtual and written. I first commenting on Title 24, I think that the PSC is not and has never been a recommending body for that title. However, there have been projects where we've received most of the residential codes. We had Title 33 and Title 30, how it implemented to the Housing Bureau, came to the PSC and on to council. So even though we weren't recommending body on the Title 30 piece of the project, the timing was coordinated and it went to council at the same time. So I think that what I'm hearing from testimony is an appropriate calling out of the timing issue here, because the city did a lot of work to come up with the Title 24 changes in the discussion draft. They are now deferred, and it's feeling to me a trend, and I want to understand this better, that's not very encouraging, because as the city's responded to the BIOP, the sequencing of projects, which the PSC doesn't weigh in on, seems to have a trend that I'm not sure I'm comfortable with, where the projects we've done first are the ones that might not, South Reach, Middle Reach, now we're doing this project. It seems almost guided by avoiding legal exposure more so than equity and climate. And I say that because the project that seems to be last to attend to is Columbia Corridor, which abuts low-income minority neighborhoods. Why is that the last one? Is it because the city is avoiding a legal concern of businesses in that area? Is this the right order for the projects to go? And are the winners through this process the groups that are able to delay their portion of the implementation the longest? If that's the case, then I have concern about the sequencing Portland's going through, which gets back to that first question of Title 24. Why does that piece defer, whereas the Title 33 moves forward? Timing may be substantive, not just policy. I also want to talk about the, I think that we do have great legal support. We appreciate that with the city. And I think it would be very helpful for us to have some outside of meeting opportunity to raise questions and get some guidance, particularly as we have written testimony. On the one hand, we just heard in person that the city is at risk by delaying our compliance. And we also have written testimony saying that it would be irresponsible for the city to even adopt the Title 30 changes in this proposal, Title 33 changes in the proposal, because to do so without having the NEPA recommendations in front of us is like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. I mean, that's not exactly the metaphor used in the written testimony, but the implication is that if we were to, we shouldn't even do the zoning code changes until we see what NEPA tells us what we need to do, which we don't have in hand yet. So I want to understand that better as well. So I guess I'm not speaking so much to the substance of the project, but it is sort of raising a little bit of alarm for me in the way, since I've been on the commission for over 7 years and keep hearing about the EOA coming. And I understand the reasons that the city hasn't done it yet, but I'm becoming less comfortable with those reasons as things continue to defer. Thanks.
Thank you. Others? Jesse, go for it.
Yeah, I just want to. Oh, can you hear me? I just want to echo what Eli and Erica said. I think you guys both really hit the nail on the head with the way you phrased both the need to have more information about this and to talk about it with the Title 24 amendments, even though that may not be in our purview. It seems like that's where most of the public testimony is coming from. Additionally, having some lawyers present, or like I have a legal background and I'm still very confused by how this all operates with the ESA and what we could be doing to make sure that we're protecting these endangered species that are in the Willamette River. And I know that the EOA and everything else up in the industrial lands is going to be a big process, and we don't want to necessarily put staff on something when we already have so many other projects for them to work on. But as we've heard time and time again from various testimony, like that is very important and the community is very interested in it. And we have this body to be able to have hearings over topics like that and to really push that forward, especially when we're in a climate crisis. So would really just love to push that forward as well.
Thank you, Jesse. Caitlin? Or I'm sorry. Good heavens, Katie?
Yeah, I feel like I kind of got us started earlier, and thing is, I missed the last meeting. I didn't watch it, but it was, it's pretty technical. And so I was going through the plan, and there was just, I sort of naively, I mean, not completely naively, I've been on this body for a while, but I'm not, a scientist or anything like that. But it struck me that everyone was talking about this 24, the 24, the Title 24 amendments, and I could not quite figure out how that fit into the plan. It just seems to me that we should actually, I don't know, there was something very much missing. I also was kind of going, why is South Waterfront exempt? I couldn't figure that out. So some of these things are just like questions that I'm coming up with that I want answers to. And I still don't quite understand why the 24 was taken out. And the more I hear, the more mysterious it almost seems to me. And the South Waterfront, it sounds like there's something going on there. I would just like some answers to these questions. In some ways, others may be ahead of me in terms of understanding what exactly happened. So very simple answers would be helpful. But I don't feel like we're getting those. Yeah. And another area that I'm very interested in was that whole area around the cut, which I didn't even know what that meant. That was another question I was going to ask. What exactly does that mean? And is the 1.5 mitigation, is that enough? I mean, we're not hearing anything about that, whether that is appropriate. What are other people doing? And also looking at the mitigation plans, I looked them up online, and super interesting, super interesting, but also as far as I can tell, very theoretical. They're sort of places that haven't actually been built yet. So that's where I am on this, and I'd love some more answers to my questions.
Thank you, Katie. Oriana?
Yeah, I want to first just show appreciation for the folks who testified tonight and who are trying to translate some really complicated material to community and engage around feedback. And then also show appreciation to staff, because I think we're all feeling a little confused tonight and maybe being a little bit crabby about it. And I think we still have appreciation for the work that went into this particular project. So I want to make sure that that's acknowledged. All that said, I do echo the concerns of my fellow commissioners around the process. I think we should not have something coming to us in which we feel so confused about what the different pieces mean and how they interact. And I certainly have concerns from the perspective of community engagement. And I think as Erica noted, and as Cassie noted, that contrasts with a co-creative process to one in which community feels maybe a little bit alienated. And I wonder if there's an opportunity to do a little bit of course correction through the process that we had before the PSC. And maybe this is a space where we can even incubate a little bit how we can be helpful as a body in helping to ensure that good engagement happens and that things are well understood by the public in terms of the impacts. I'm not sure exactly what that looks like, but I do wonder if it would be valuable. And I want to be cautious about not volunteering anyone to plan something that is complicated, given that everybody is so low capacity and burned out right now across different sectors. But it might be helpful for me to actually go out there and see some of the places that may be impacted and just better understand, like, what does it mean? Right now, everything feels very abstract to me. And I picked that up in the testimony as well, that there are these far-reaching future impacts that could be completely disastrous if we don't get this right, that feel very far off. But then there's also, at least in my mind, a lack of understanding around what are the near-term changes and how are they going to impact the fabric of the city, the economy, and communities and the environment in this process as well. And so I think anything staff can do, even if it's not as far as trying to take us out there and show us, but even just pictures of what something looks like could be really, really valuable. And I think I would really appreciate just that kind of more tangible approach. And I think that would be really beneficial for the public as well to see what some of those changes look like. As to the Title 24, I want to echo commissioners in sharing that I don't feel like we need to make a decision on this particular piece, but I do think it needs to be brought into the conversation here. And this might be a valuable opportunity to hear public testimony on that piece, even if we're not the decision-making body, to still allow people to talk about something that is holistic in a holistic way and ensure that the interactions between building code and zoning code are well understood. And to make two final quick points, because I know we're starting to get a little bit late, I do want to just acknowledge, like, what happens when we don't get flood mitigation planning right, which is the history of Vanport in the city and the extreme equity concerns that come up with who is impacted by development that should not have happened in a floodplain that deeply impacted the Black community of Portland. So I think we need to keep that in mind in this work that we're doing here, that the consequences of not getting this right, even if they're far off and feel abstract, are quite substantial. And we should hold that in mind. And that interaction between building and zoning code, I think, really comes to a head in Vanport in terms of what are we building, how are we building it, where are we building it, and who is going to live there along the way. And the last piece I'll name is I think it would be very helpful to understand whether any tribal consultation happened as a part of this project, understanding that the traditional fishing grounds that exist along the river and also the potential for historic and cultural resources, it would be very helpful for me to understand what did or did not happen on that front and to make sure that the city was in compliance with consultation, especially around the historic and cultural resources end. Sorry, that was a lot. Again, appreciation to staff. I feel like we can get this right, and this is a really good opportunity to show how this body can be a valuable place to test something out and figure out how to bring the public and the community along in a process and to better understand what is in a proposal and how it's going to impact the community.
The wonderful thing about going last as chair is that I just get to echo the wisdom of my fellow commissioners. So I love the concept of incubation and bringing that into this conversation. And I also am thinking a lot as we are looking at work groups, the two work groups of how do we build welcoming community space in this for this commission, on this commission, and also what is our roles as we are looking to go more into a planning commission. But part of that is also collaboration. And in past, we've had collaboration with the design commission. Even, I remember, design overlay zone amendments. We had two very we had two distinct areas of responsibility, but it was a complementary structure within a larger project. And I wonder if can to what extent can we bring that in? And I guess I think as we are looking to move into more of when we are looking at roles and responsibilities, I think we need to be looking at it in context of how we are collaborating with other commissions and ensuring that we are not, building in these silos. So that Portland is very good at doing. We are very good at doing this as a city, just writ large. And the other, community and welcoming, how do we make this something that I feel like anything that is over working in communications, anything that is over a 6th grade reading level is less accessible. And so we're definitely over my head in some of these. It's nice to know that I'm not alone in that. So I'm really grateful to staff for getting us where we're at, and I echo others. And I'm grateful to everyone who came to testify, everyone who has worked for long months on this process, and that's advocates and staff. And I'd also like to echo Eli's comment of, we do have wonderful legal opinions, and can we have a subcourt legal briefings on, what does this all mean and what is the charge? So, I was just going to ask, what else, is there anything else that has not been said that has come up for folks? Eli, please.
One thought is that perhaps, I know, Sally, you summarized at our briefing the outreach you already did, which I think did go out to tribes. So maybe just refreshing our group what you already did would be great. And in terms of fellow commissions, which I love that concept, we've done that with Title 11, where there's a commission there. I think that there is kind of a challenge on this one because there is no commission that looks over Title 24. It goes straight from Bureau to Council. So we don't have the opportunity that we would in some other settings to co-conspire with them. Thanks.
Is this on? Yes. Jeff, I'll just start just briefly about Title 24, and then maybe you can talk about the tribal connections here. Just one thing about Title 24, as Eli said, it goes directly to City Council. We've had some conversations with the BDS staff who are working on it, and they've recently brought in somebody who is kind of their code person. So they're building a team to help move this forward. My understanding is that they are starting to build to build their outreach program, and we added a name and an address in your in the memo that we sent to you, and we'll make sure that goes up on the website so that people can know who to contact about the Title 24 changes. So we'll definitely do that. There may be not only Title 24 changes, but also my understanding is there could be an administrative rule with some of the details that they'll need to have in there, because it gets very technical when you try to figure out how to engineer something like that. So that's Jeff.
Sure. I mean, I guess a little bit more about Title 24, just in terms of what the cut part means. I mean, it's very basic. Sort of just may as well just address it now rather than like in a memo or something. I mean, essentially, right now, our current code, and that's another thing I guess I wanted to highlight, and I meant to in the presentation. I guess I would say a lot of the testimony seemed to be saying that we are removing Title 24 requirements for cut fill. We are not removing anything. You would still, right now, most of the city, we had someone testify related to South Waterfront, which was removed out of that metro map, and a few other areas. But in most of the city, the predominance of the city, there is a cut fill requirement, a balanced cut fill, which is basically 1-to-1, which is the intent of the FEMA biological opinion, is to achieve 1-to-1. What they have come to determine, or when they looked at research, was that in fact, if it was just 1-to-1, you did not always get there over time. And so that is why there are recommended higher ratios for that compensatory cut. So basically the idea is, right now, the way it's set, if you are building something and you feel you want to raise your building up and you place fill, and say you can do it through FEMA to actually remove it from the 100-year floodplain, the level of what is the expected flood, where the flood height is. You can put fill, and it's fine with FEMA. But for us, our regulations say for that volume that you placed in the fill that you placed in the floodplain, you have to cut an equal volume to make sure that the floodwaters continue and the capacity for floodwaters are maintained after the project is built. And so the biological opinion had certain areas where the recommendation was to increase those, sometimes 2-to-1. The volume would have to be twice as large. The cut would have to be twice as large as the fill, or what the other piece that was included was that you have to account for structure. So if you put buildings in the floodplain, right now we just address fill as a part of our metro requirements. But if you put a building in the floodplain, you also have to mitigate that volume that is in the building below the expected flood elevation, the flood height. And so that addition of structure is a big change. But that idea of what a cut is just that you need to create capacity for whatever, that you have to offset that reduction in capacity that's part of either fill or structure.
So it's very mechanical. It's just the same amount of fill that gets pulled out or put in has to be taken out of some other corner of the river
in the same waterway. And that's why it's in the building code. Is very engineering focused and demonstrating that you have adequate capacity. That's not what we do in the zoning code. That's really civil engineers look at that and confirm that yes, your calculations are right. You've estimated the amount of capacity that's lost, and you've offset it. And in some cases we do allow for offsite, but again, it's primary. So that's cut part.
I was reading the report, and very early on it said that human-made wetlands are not the same, and don't have the same capacities as naturally made wetlands. So, I had a lot of questions about that, because I was wondering where you were getting your ratios and et cetera, et cetera. But that could be that's not so much our concern. Although, like I said, I think it's important that somebody looks at the whole plan. And that has been sort of the way that the Planning and Sustainability Commission worked. We looked at the whole plan, even though only a section of it was zoning, which is, our direct responsibility. I'd be sad if that became, if the way of dealing with the planning and sustainability was to just keep us focused on just these little bits that are our responsibility, and no panel of citizens is looking at the whole big picture. I think that brings a lot. I don't know. But thank you for that information about, and that's not, yeah. Thank you for that information about what the cut meant, because that was all the way through there and it was just confusing. I figured it was something like that. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. And
Oriana?
Commissioner McNair, it looks like she has a question, but I could also go ahead and respond, which I think was my original intent. There was expectation. So related to outreach to the tribes, we did reach out, and we had said this in the briefing, but we reached out prior to the discussion draft via email, and primarily to decision makers at the tribes to say we were working on this project. We offered to meet with them and discuss our proposals. No one took us up on that at the time. And then after the discussion draft was released, we followed up at the staff level and said, this is our plan, and similarly offered to meet with tribal governments to do that. There was some hope that some would meet with us, but again, we didn't have anyone who had requested specifically to meet with us, but we did offer. And then a part of our engagement, so we had, and again, we sort of discussed this at the briefing, but we did some open houses when the discussion draft was released, but then subsequent to that, we did 3 focus groups, which were kind of focused on specific issues and communities. So we had a BIPOC focus group that, again, we understood it was challenging in terms of the technical aspects of our work and for a layperson to be able to understand. But and then we also had one that was specifically focused on, it was urban native community. And then we had a third focus group that was just environmental groups with the hope of getting some BIPOC representation on there. And so through those, we did our best to, again, kind of get input from sort of underrepresented communities. We can, and how exactly we might do better in terms of more coordination, we can discuss if that's what's of interest.
I believe we discussed our outreach plan with the CIC when we started. So that's another piece. And then finally, when we were working on the South Reach, we made some of these same amendments to the plan. And during that process, we had extensive involvement with tribal governments. You may recall we had a boat tour, and I think there were 7 tribes that joined us on this boat tour where we went through all of the various elements of the plan. It may be that some of it seemed redundant. I'm not sure.
Commissioners, Patricia Diefenhofer, I just wanted to, I'm not sure if you're done with the comments for this evening, but I wanted to just acknowledge that there are a lot of questions. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to, we have the work session in the next meeting, and then the subsequent meeting after that is an additional work session with the hopes of coming to a recommendation. But in the meantime, between now and the next meeting, we're going to do our very best to come back with information that's going to provide the full picture. Recognize that right now there's a feeling that you can't, even if certain things are not before this commission, you just can't see the whole picture and how the different components it will interact with each other in the future. And I think Commissioner McNair, I haven't said your last name yet. I'm sorry if I said it wrong. I think you explained that you need a little more tangible understanding of what's being proposed, and to the extent that pictures or some other tools can be used to try to help explain it in a less abstract way, in a more tangible way. I think that's all things that very much resonate with me, and I just want to acknowledge that, and I want to see what we can do to bring back information at the next meeting that will help answer a lot of those questions, make it a little bit more tangible, and hopefully simplify things a little bit. So, and we're happy to hear if there's anything else you want us to take back, but you've given us a lot of food for thought, and there's been a lot of good comments and discussion that we can work with.
Thank you. Oriana, thank you for your patience.
Yeah, just going back to Eli's comment about there not being a body that we could collaborate with on Title 24, to me really speaks to the need to have both those things function together, which I hear you, Director, in wanting to bring us a more tangible and kind of holistic approach, which is very much appreciated. But also just thinking about the public and the folks who came tonight and are confused about the process. I think at the very least, we need to hear from the BDS team, like, what is the process going to be? And perhaps even encourage them if there are ways that this body can help be a space for public discussion. Because it seems very strange to me for us to have this public hearing and then make a recommendation on part of it, and then have the other part come to council, and council be a little bit perhaps surprised by what people say on the Title 24 side. Like, this is a way to help make sure that the record is complete for council, even if we don't make recommendations or put it in our letter. And so I do hope that this body can help be the public space to both understand what the process is for Title 24, but also if there is a way to bring it here and to align it better with the rest of the plan within people's capacity, and acknowledging that we're all humans doing our best, and BDS can only do so much, especially if they're onboarding a new person. But to the extent that it can move together, I'm really hearing that from the public. And I hope that there are ways that this body can help to kind of keep that public record really complete, so council understands what all of the pieces are and understands what to expect from public testimony.
Thank you, Ariana. I also note, I believe Jason Butler Brown is here from BDS, and it's just because we have been talking about BDS, and I want to talk about you when you are in the room. If you have any thoughts.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, I'm Jason Butler Brown. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the section supervisor for the site development section within BDS. And so my team does the permit plan review for geotechnical erosion control and floodplain development on private property. And so the Title 24 changes that we've been talking about this evening are the Title 2450 floodplain development requirements. As Sally mentioned, we are bringing on staff to help scope these proposed code changes. And we're hoping to take a look at, clearly observing the concern and testimony that the folks are providing with respect to the compensatory excavation requirements, and wanting to honor that. And so we're looking at what type of public engagement will be made during this effort, I guess is the best way to phrase that. And so I really appreciate the offers that are being made this evening in terms of cooperation with the PSC, and we'll be working with Sally and Jeff to kind of, again, coordinate our communication, because I imagine that even though this Title 24 work is being put into a different lane, if you will, we've still been working very closely together as we have been implementing Title 33 changes throughout the city, in the effort to bring the entire city into compliance within the deadline that we are receiving from FEMA to implement these, again, programmatic wide changes to the National Flood Insurance Program and how it's implemented, not only in Oregon, of course, but making it work for Portland.
Thank you very much. And thank you for holding on for all 3 hours to come in at the last moment. I appreciate it. Are there any other we will continue. This is far from our last moment, thank heavens, because we have a lot of questions, as you said, Patricia. Are there any burning questions that or thoughts that folks have before we adjourn for the evening? Okay. Well, then we will be continuing this project to October 25th, which is the Planning and Sustainability Commission meeting at 5 p.m. I just want to thank staff for being here. Thank open signal as always. Everyone who testified. A reminder that our written testimony remains open until Friday, this Friday at 5 p.m. Thanks to everyone for being here, and with that, we are adjourned.